as an addendum a little bit later. I think that's the way we got to go on this. There's no question. Given the current circumstances. So I think we should split this recommendation. Everybody okay with that? Or do you want to just do it all in one?
Well, I don't think we can do it all in one. Yeah. Oh, is it okay?
No, yeah, first and second for both.
Yeah.
Bylaws.
So that bylaw number 489, 2019, as amended, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Building Bylaw number 489, 2019, be read a first and second time as amended. That bylaw 491, 2019, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Bylaw Notice Enforcement Bylaw number 196, 2008, amendment bylaw number 491, 2019, be read a first and second time. And that council refer the proposed revised green building standards for residential rezoning policy number 01-07 to the Environment and Climate Action Advisory Committee for comment and recommendations, or just for comment?
Comment, general, it's fine.
Okay. Period.
Good.
Okay, second, Maureen, thank you very much. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you, that's unanimous. All right, now business. We're going to move to a closed council meeting now. We're going to have to kick you out. We're not. Yeah. If you do want to come back, but I know you're hobbling around there and you're probably not getting the most comfortable place in the world, or just sit outside for about 15 minutes while we get this cleared up. Your choice.
I may come back in a bit, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how things shake down. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
So you can recognize him with the,
Okay. Lots of time for dinner. Lots of time for dinner.
No, we can't start the council meeting already, of course, can we? No.
No, so
Wow, that'll be.
It'll be nice. It'll be nice.
Yeah, we won't have to be.
Very good.
It's so nice to not have to rush.
I know, it's like.
Bring up the candlesticks.
Let's keep the show going, okay? Let's not rest on our laurels here.
we can put an extra course in.
Yeah, we're not done yet.
Yeah.
now I'm in the closed.
All right.
Okay.
Oh, that's why it's there.
I'm not quite there yet.
Get that.
I wish I didn't have to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page.
Take Daniel long to get out of here.
I know, I was like, actually gonna ask him something.
He's coming back.
Yeah. Oh, he's coming back already.
Oh, yeah, he's got all sorts of.
Yeah.
That's interesting
stuff.
Yeah.
He's so keen on the building bylaw, he's going to make those amendments right now.
Oh, that's just. Oh, really? Woo. It's right for walk.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna ask Daniel, and they were right on the beach in Coolidge. Trees on the beach there, that's what's on the beach. How was that possible?
All right. So the new business, we're going to move to a closed council meeting. The recommendation is the council move to a closed council meeting immediately following the special council meeting to discuss items pursuant to section 90-1-A and 90-2-B of the Community Charter. -1A is personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality, or another position appointed by the municipality. And 2, Bravo, the consideration of information received in held in confidence relating to the negotiations between the municipality and the provincial government, or the federal government, or both, or between the provincial government or the federal government, or both, and a third party.
Well done.
That was a mouthful.
We need to have that tape.
I've never used that section before. Just
That's a funny one, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do I have a seconder on that?
Yep, sure.
Good, thanks, Rob. And, okay, all in favor? Way to go. File that one. Pick up this one. You're all ready to go? I'm closed, thank you. Okay, so this is a closed council meeting. Call to order, approval of the agenda. Anything coming?
Just a minor typo in, well, not minor, a typo in the application for Blue Water Park. It's
Oh, okay.
John, it's actually Jason as well.
Okay. We'll correct that as we go along. Okay, so the approval of the agenda. Thank you, Michael, and me. And all in favor, thank you. Consent agenda. Does anybody have anything there that they would,
I think I do.
okay?
On the minute? Oh,
I don't
Oh, the whole
know.
thing.
Staff reports.
So I've
Yeah.
updated the, oh, sorry.
I do with 2.2. The transportation, is that still in consent? I guess it is, I sort of hadn't realized. Yeah. Yeah, it's just the, if you go into the TAC appointments, the names are wrong.
Oh.
So it's Matthew Reddicock has been appointed on there, and Javier Estebecorena.
Oh, the names of people on the committee?
The names of the people on the committee,
I
yeah.
thought I
Like
read
us.
Yeah.
Hope, do you know anything about that?
I don't, but I can.
So Matthew was appointed last council meeting, I think?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
That name.
Yeah.
Don't remember.
And he
those days.
attended the last meeting, and Javier was making great contributions, but he was really busy, and I'm pretty sure he's actually
He
formally resigned.
he resigned.
Yeah, yeah. So the numbers are correct, it's just you gotta slap
names
in
are-
Matthew's name instead of Javier's.
Okay.
I can let Steph know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that in?
The website is correct, so she must have just,
Oh, okay, grab an old one or something.
Yeah.
She was batting a very high average at some of the
No.
reports.
So the recommendation is council approve the items contained in the consent agenda as amended for the September 9th, 2019 closed council meeting. With that, second, thank you, Rob, all in favor. All right, so. And reports of committees, council, commissions,
That was all in the consent agenda?
That was under consent.
Oh, that is on consent, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, yes, in the consent agenda it says.
Go down to Dale.
New business,
Okay.
Councilor
I'm
Hawking,
gonna find him.
removing Bowen Island Crown Lands from BC Timber Sales logging plans verbal report. First of all, David, I think those are fabulous. Those are
Thanks.
really good. I was thinking that one was a little bit, that first one was a little bit, the timber sales was a
Yeah.
little bit threatening, but you know what?
No, it's
No.
saying,
No,
yeah.
it's
We're not
it's very
interested.
good. Yeah.
I mean, I tried to be polite and all that, but direct.
Yeah,
So I'll
absolutely.
just tell you what I did here.
Really well done.
What I did is I did, I guess, 3 little chunks of research. One is I went back over all the work that was done by the last council. Some of that I was unaware of, so Kathy and Maureen helped me, I think, on that. Got into some old, minutes and so on. And a couple of comments about that is that Murray's correspondence with Alan Johnsrud was really quite interesting, because Murray put forward an idea which I thought was quite reasonable. He said, look, we don't want industrial logging, but, we could have some artisanal, we want to conserve the lands mostly for recreation and conservation and so on. There could be small scale artisanal logging that would be used for something remote. It
Yeah.
seems like, okay, that sounds okay. His response is any logging that we would do would have to be a minimum of 50% of the AAC, which is the 8,000
Wow,
cubic
wow.
meters. Yeah, so basically, yeah, so there's really no opportunity there because it's basically going to be industrial logging.
Yeah.
Because even if, and then I know I've chatted to some people about, community forests,
that's-
and it's the same thing.
Yeah, I would
You
think
end
so.
up, you have the idea you're going in to have some nice friendly horse logging kind of thing, and
Yeah.
and it turns out, no, it's the same companies, and it would be an industrial operation. So
Yeah.
it's really,
Yeah.
yeah.
Also,
Yeah, because I think the idea was, because that's been floated a number of times.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a lot of artisans here
Sure.
that make wonderful
Yeah.
hand-created furniture.
Yeah.
So to be able to take a maple tree or a fir tree or a cedar
Exactly.
tree and do something, yeah. So Tom Johnstone actually wrote the letter? Because do we have the letter that he sent that you're referring to in this anywhere? Because you keep saying when you cancel BC Timber Sales plans, you said in your letter, so he was writing in his capacity as Woodlands manager, I presume.
I'd have to go back to those letters.
Yeah, because I don't recall having seen the letters, I guess.
I don't either.
Yeah, and I guess.
The original letters.
the original, the letters from Tom Johnson. And I guess, you know, I think the first paragraph is a bit too, it's just gonna get us back up. And that's not gonna help. you know.
I'm sorry, Alison, I'm not sure what letter you're asking me about.
Well, he said, we write to inform you, it's your letter to Tom Johnson.
Yeah,
And he
okay.
says, in the summer of 2017, BC Timber Sales
Yeah.
informed Long Island Municipal Council, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
As you are aware, council unanimously opposed any
yeah.
Islanders were relieved when you canceled BC Timber Sales plans, but were troubled by your
Right.
statement.
That's
It
right.
is important.
Oh, sure, I've got that.
Yeah,
I'll
because
go
I
find it
haven't
for you.
seen
I've,
that
no, no,
letter. And I guess you're talking about Bowen's newly elected council. We've been around for almost a year now, so,
I wrote this 6 months ago.
yeah, I know.
4 months.
Yeah.
That's all right.
And you see, and then he also says, and then at the end you say, we ask you to respect council's decisions and to terminate whatever plans you have to include our community in your future logging plans. Well, it's BC Timber Sales logging.
I think you're right. That's a good change, Alison. Instead of
you
you,
know,
BCTs.
Yeah, all the
I agree
way,
with you.
yeah, all the way
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
through.
Okay.
And then I guess my other is just on process, because we got 3 letters. We're having a meeting with Minister Donaldson.
We don't know that yet.
Well,
Yeah.
but I guess what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
none of this should go until we know whether or not we're having a meeting. And if we're having the meeting, let's take the briefing note, and then the letter to him should be a follow-up after the meeting.
Wait a minute.
I don't know about that, Alison. Why? I mean,
Well, it's always better to have the discussion face-to-face with somebody about
yes,
what you want.
agreed. Yeah,
And, you know,
But he has to know what's coming.
no, but that's the briefing note. And then the letter afterwards would be depending on what he says, you know, thank you for your meeting, but respectfully, we have to disagree with you, we believe the following. And the other thing that's come out since, which I haven't read enough detail, the province has issued something about wanting to encourage the forestry sector. And there's a whole bunch of new policies and stuff that have come out. So I think we need to be cognizant of what those are. Because I think what I sort of heard through the grapevine is that the cut is falling down up the valley. The amount of, it's.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
It's declining.
Yeah.
And if we're in there, then, yeah.
They're gonna be looking
Well,
over here.
yeah. And what about, and then I'm also understanding that it's the chief, is it the minister that takes us out or the chief forester?
It's the chief forester.
So
my understanding.
why aren't we writing to her?
it's the minister that instructs. It's, I mean, I could go back into so part of what I did is I reviewed this with a lawyer as well, with what the mechanisms were. And the mechanisms.
With Chris?
No, an external lawyer who's worked on this sort of stuff. So if you remember when our MLA, then if you look at the words that our MLA said, he said, we need to take Bowen out of the AAC so that it doesn't just go dump it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And he said, you can do that in these 6 ways. The 6 ways were the ways that were in this document.
Yes. Yeah.
Basically, he repeated exactly what we gave him. Well, I gave him this.
Yeah.
And the lawyer who I referred to,
Did you give us all that at some point down the road?
I gave you this
We
last
were
week.
given that in
Yes,
2017.
yeah.
Yeah, so I thought it came out.
Yeah. So all that, the legal work, he agreed with, like, our MLA agreed, and that was from a lawyer who does work for logging and First Nation stuff, who lives here on the island, and that's where that came from.
Okay,
So
so
it's a minister's responsibility, the
he
minister.
directs the chief forester?
Yes,
So she doesn't make recommendations to the minister?
I could go back into the exact wording, but that's what I understand. The minister could direct, and we'll have the lieutenant governor and council could remove Bowen Island from Chinook. The minister could remove Bowen. The lieutenant governor and council could designate Bowen Crown lands so that Bowen Island would be removed. The minister could direct the chief forester to remove. And, so
Yeah.
basically it's a
Yeah.
minister could
Ministerial
direct.
Yeah, the lieutenant and governor will be.
With cabinet.
With cabinet,
With
yeah.
cabinet.
So,
So basically it's either cabinet or the minister.
Okay, Maureen?
And I have reservations about all 3 documents. And it's not because they're not clear or well-written or make an argument. It's that, it goes back to Allison's first point, which is that we'll get their back up right out the door. And we met with, in 2017, we met with Alan Johnsford. And in 2018, we met with the minister, who was shell-shocked, given everything that was going on. At that meeting, we focused on logging, and we focused on the rural argument. I don't want to be walking in the door to meet with Minister Donaldson and to be hammering away on logging after we have had essentially nothing to say for the better part of a year. I just think it's bad strategy. Also, under the last council, and I think you agreed as part of Defend Island Forest, we talked about the importance of shifting this discussion to a political level rather than an operational level, because we weren't going to get anywhere by dealing with the operational folks. And Tom Johnson, who is like so far off my radar, I mean, he's not going to be able to do anything. The people that we have dealt with in person are Mike Peters and Alan Johnsford. So I mean, even they would make more sense as recipients of the letter. And Jordan, when he spoke in March of last year, he spoke and the minister responded. And at the time, what the minister had to say is, what we want to do is to have some time to engage in discussions with the residents and as well with our own BCPS personnel. That's why forest stewardship plan was pulled back. We're going to embark on those discussions, and that's to really dig down into some of the topics that the residents are concerned about. I think we pick up on that point. You know, he's gotten through his 2 years of wildfire and has had a bit of a rest. And he put this, it's on the public record, it's in Hansard. I think if we went to him and said, thank you so much for the rural designation, and we want to help you and our MLA proceed with this discussion. And by the way, Bowen Island Municipality continues to be strongly opposed. I think it's just too heavy-handed. I mean, we've met the guy.
Yeah.
I have a sense of the capacity of him and his staff. I just don't want to go out there with guns blazing, and that's what this correspondence
And last year,
feels
we were
like.
still just getting to speak with them.
Yeah.
And they've come up with this whole new, as I say, forestry thing, which I just haven't had a chance to.
They're looking for forests to cut down.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and then the other whole issue is the Squamish Nation.
What?
The Squamish Nation.
Yeah, that's separate. We deal with the minister first.
But
Why do we have to deal with the Squamish Nation?
I don't
well,
know.
I think they would
Because
probably, because if you recall the email, the press release I sent around, they've done a community forest agreement with Squamish. They have a community forest agreement with Whistler.
There's a horseshoe.
Yeah,
They own Interfor.
Yeah.
we're not.
So,
Why are we bringing that into this conversation?
well, I don't know where it fits in the taking it out of the annual allowable cut.
They have to be consulted.
They will have to be consulted.
We recognize that.
Yeah.
That's for the
Well,
minister.
that's for the ministers.
Yes.
Really, just my really strong recommendation is ramp it down, talk, get the basic point across, and then move forward. Because I really do feel it's a similar situation with BC Hydro. We went in there last year, it was sort of blah, 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 and we were supposed to pick up, coordinating a hydro ferries and somebody else meeting. We didn't do it.
It's not our job.
We agreed to it. If it's not our job, we shouldn't have said we were going to do it.
It's so far above our people the whole thing. But anyway,
Anyway, my point is,
Yeah.
I don't think this will work, bottom line.
I think I agree with your point that we should build on what he said. And how do we integrate those two? I think we have to be, well, we have to be fairly heavy-handed with these guys. They have to understand that we're
But I
not
guess-
messing around here.
I think my point is, let's, we do the briefing and we meet with Donaldson at UBC. I mean, we're only talking a couple of weeks from now.
Yeah.
And we have that meeting and we, refer to the previous, find out if they have proceeded with anything, what we can.
Why don't we put that in the briefing notes so they
Well, yeah.
can prepare for it and make it,
Yeah,
maybe make a few
make
phone
reference
calls?
to
Yeah,
the
before we get there.
follow-up from the notes from the last meeting. And then depending on what happens at that meeting, then send them a letter
Well-
saying thank you for, or we respectfully disagree, or,
If I
Yeah.
look at the letter crafted
Mhm.
by David, just take one to Minister Donaldson. Let us suppose he says we write to ask you. It might then read, we're writing following our meeting
yeah,
to ask
exactly, that's what
you.
I'm getting at.
With such, depending on the conversation, such changes as deemed appropriate after that meeting. And I think it's absolutely right to take those, to have those letters, to have a matter of record, but after the meeting, you know, because it's a follow-up after the meeting. And if there are so many changes that are patent common sense following, well, we can make some adjustments. Certainly the one to the minister, I don't know how everybody feels about the one to Mr. Johnston, because I've got to be honest, I wouldn't know him if I tripped over him in the square. So but certainly the one to the minister. Which is the other one, David, in your opinion, since it says that you've been kind enough to craft these, do you feel the one to the minister speaks to,
Well, the one to the minister is the important one.
Well, yeah,
The
I
one
agree.
to BC Timber Sales, I mean, basically, we know that they're not a player. They just
No.
have to do what they're told.
Yeah,
So, and I'm less interested in that letter.
agree.
But it's in terms of the meeting with the minister, so let me just follow up where you two are going. So what you're suggesting is what do we send to the minister? If we're going to meet the minister, we assume we are. If we don't, well, then something else, we do something different. But if what do we send him ahead of time?
So hope.
I think we have to reference Maureen's, that section where they said that they were going to look into this.
I've got it, he doesn't say a heck of a lot.
Oh, are they wanting a more detailed briefing note in advance?
They would like that.
Yeah, okay,
Sure.
so,
will this be in the briefing?
yeah, that's the third attachment, Michael.
Yeah, I know, I just think, well, the comments which Maureen has made,
Yeah.
could they be incorporated into this briefing document?
No, you need two documents. I think the briefing note could probably stand as is, but what you need is a softer and more personal, thank you so much, Minister Donaldson, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Rural, yay, we're rural. And by the way, let's keep the conversation on logging going. You said in Hansard, yada, yada, yada. How can we help you do that? That's my
I
suggestion.
mean, I'm looking, I've got Hansard in front of me, unless you've got something that I don't have. I'm not particularly pleased with what he said. The suggestions that the member made on behalf of some residents about completely removing the forest there from the timberland might not be in the best interest of what some of the residents want.
Yeah, I know, but he still made a commitment that they were going to do something.
What
that they were
did
going to
he
follow.
carry on to say there? What else?
It might not be in the best, as for instance, community wildfire protection plans that might need to be put in place, which are completely the opposite
Yeah.
of logging plans. Like
Yeah.
completely the opposite. It's a complete bullshit statement.
Yeah, I agree.
And you
Well,
know.
it is and it isn't,
Oh, no.
because
Well,
they've
to a
logged the
certain
pine beetle, which is up in the interior, and had they done it earlier, they wouldn't have had some of the
Yeah.
fire issues they've had.
Just, it's a completely different thing here. Like,
Yeah.
like the trees that they want are
Keep
the,
it short. Don't give him the whole thing back. Just remind him that he said
All right,
in the
okay.
house.
he did say he wanted to talk with us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the
so-
correct term is
Here we
as
go.
referred in the house. I think the word Hansard, we all know it's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
as he
as
said
stated in the house.
Yeah,
It's
stated in
the-
house,
it's
and
the
then
proper
quote what
form
he
of it.
said, and then just say, have you got plans, how can we help? Yeah.
Okay.
So now this is
We only
a
have
briefing.
15 minutes with them.
This is a letter that's going now.
This
It's
is
going
a
to be
letter that
attached
will
to the
go
briefing
out
note.
with the briefing.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
So the
Okay.
briefing note is okay?
Yeah.
Well, it needs a little tweaking maybe, but I would put the letter in front.
Yeah, the letter in front.
Yeah, put the soft part in first,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then come in with the hammer a little bit.
Well, you can also have a sense of the letter is coming from the mayor. And
Yeah.
the briefing note is prepared by somebody who's like going into all the minutiae.
Right.
And
Yeah,
so it
right.
distances you.
Or do we want?
So it should be objective.
Do we want the letter even to go at this point, rather than the briefing note starting off with reminding him about Hansard?
I
we
think,
need both.
I think, I know, I agree with Maureen.
Yeah.
A soft letter reminding with Hansard, we want to have a conversation.
Thank you.
Looking forward to-
Great
Thank you
guy.
for the,
The grammar and style of the letters are different. This is just a structural thing, quite frankly, and someone will look at it.
Very objective, yeah.
The other letter is one that which expresses the spirit and the intent of what we're trying to do. And the whole phraseology and the whole is different.
That's
all right.
good.
I will
We
Are
feel
we
good
gonna
about that?
send the letter before we know we've got a meeting with them?
okay, I'm going to give you one more bit of information.
Yeah.
So I talked to a lawyer as well, and then there's several conservation groups who are working on looking at what they can do about house app. And so I spoke to all of them. And one of them asked to remain confidential, but they're doing an activity, they're doing some work with the minister that is exactly the same. And they feel that a letter from us would be very strong and help them in what they're doing. They've asked me to keep this confidential, so I'm not going to say any more than what I just said, but there's somebody working out there in the same vein, exactly.
For the whole
Biosphere, yeah.
No, which is the biosphere, that's a different one.
No, but the whole region,
Yeah.
the whole house sound.
No.
They're working on the whole house sound, but they're also focusing right now on Bowen Island.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and is that a point that we want to, I don't think it's
Well,
on your letter, is
My
part
question
No.
about the timing of
the
the
UNESCO
letter.
biosphere thing?
UNESCO,
Because we're basically going to apply for
we're
that.
going to apply for that, and I think that could be thrown in there. I agree, because that's new since,
But the
You know, and that could, lobbying could jeopardize our entry into that.
yeah.
Well, but the intent of the biosphere is not necessarily to stop all industry.
No, it's not.
No, that's correct. I agree.
Okay, so my concern with sending the letter separately from the briefing note, or in advance of knowing that we have a meeting with him, he may decide he doesn't want to have a meeting.
No, I agree with that.
So I don't want to send anything until we know whether or not we've got a meeting.
Okay, that's a good point,
I
Alison.
think it would be important to send the briefing now, because we may have made better chances of getting a meeting. Right now, what we have is quite vague, and they may think, oh, Bowen Island doesn't really have anything to say, so put them at the bottom of the pile.
Well,
So if they're, that's how they work.
Yeah, I know, but if that's the attitude you're going to take, then we're no further ahead either way, and we can, sort of suck our way into there.
Well,
And then
this
do-
briefing is a lot more information than they have now.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
We are putting the time in to provide them with some information, then why should they have taken a meeting?
But if the briefing
Yeah.
note reminds him, did we meet with him last year?
Yes.
All of us or just some of us? I don't
Oh,
remember
well, I
meeting.
think it was all of us.
I think it was all of us.
I'm-
He
I'm
was
drawing
deer in the
a blank.
headlights. Heather, we asked him, I asked him, how do you define rural? And he said that like.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, okay. No,
Nothing.
yeah.
So I like the idea of nice, smooth letter, hey, we look forward to meeting with you. You'd be saying, like, almost making an assumption we're gonna do it. Here is some background info so that they can do a bit of prep too. They're not walking through what they're gonna be asking us, and just go that route.
Yeah, I agree. We have to soften up anything that appears to be threatening.
And remind him of the commitment to do public consultation.
I'll quote
Yeah.
a bit or something like that.
And if we need threat down the road, we can rely on Bowen Island to provide threat.
Yeah, absolutely.
If this starts surfacing.
I mean, that's one thing I noticed. You didn't make reference to the number of people that were willing to,
1,000.
3,000?
yeah.
1,000.
Did you
1,000
actually?
signatures? Or
Reference?
1,000?
It was 1,000 people, but, we don't know how many would have shown up.
Yeah.
Bought 3,000 each.
We just invented that.
I do just have one, that question when the minister spoke in the House, how long ago was that?
This was,
2018.
A year ago?
A year ago?
no, it was more than that. Let's see.
It was over a year ago. I think,
March.
I say, when you read out the actual words he said, I'm thinking to myself, well, this is not what particularly something I like to hear, but I think we have to look at the minister and the context of that time and his newness, and probably, frankly, let it we would make reference to it, but I think we have to let it go and not hang on every word. I would not like to see us saying, well, excuse me, but we'd like to correct you on this, that, and the other. I hope this will, I don't think.
What he will do is get one of his aides to talk to somebody and try to get an update as well.
Okay, I will come up with a new soft letter.
Yeah.
And I might make a little bit of a change to this, but I'll have a look at this as well, the briefing note, and I'll do that tomorrow.
Okay.
And I'll send it, because we gotta do it fast. But except for what about Allison's point? Should we find out if we've got a meeting? When do we find out if we have a meeting?
Well, Hope's suggesting that maybe they don't have enough information to want to have a meeting with us. And I'm worried that if they just were coming in there and just held up for letter that we're out of the allowable cut, and we're not ready to consider anything, then they might say there's no point in meeting with us.
It's usually this week, or
So
sometime
sooner
this
rather
week that we
than-
get
Okay.
the confirmation, so the sooner the better.
Well, bump up the thank you so much for
Yeah.
granting Bowen Island rural status. It has meant such a difference.
Yeah, we look forward to.
And the,
meeting
and the
Future
funding we
vote on
got.
Assumption.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the funding we got from them for an economic development plan.
Yeah, was that from them?
That's from
Yes, that's from
Can
the
you just
rural
send me some
finance
good words?
guys.
Yeah,
Good, nice words?
good nice
Yeah,
words. Yeah.
because
Okay.
we're.
Just out,
talking-
I'm all out of good nice words.
Well, in the
I'm best at reading
Thank
words.
you.
But in the briefing note, you're talking about local interest in economic development.
Yeah,
and-
so thank you.
And they.
Yeah, no, I think some nice thanks to start it off. And we'd like to have a conversation with you also about the logging issue that, cropped up 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And
See if we
attach
progress
the briefing note, and I'll look
And
at the
and the
briefing.
other is the,
Yeah.
I was thinking like the 14 community watersheds, like a map that showed the overlap of the watersheds. And you've got a typo in here, you've got cutbacks, not cut blocks.
Wait, which one?
Top of the second page,
Of the
briefing.
briefing note? Oh, thank you.
Something, a map that showed the cut blocks
I actually
and
have that. I've got it in here.
and the water areas over top of it.
Yeah.
might
The
be-
legal advice I have is, I've got that in here, I'll have to go find it.
Well, we take it with us.
Right here, community watersheds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We take it with us.
We take
It's-
it with us, yeah.
It's basically, the water issue is good to talk to people about, because everybody says, like, what? But the ministry is used to receiving concerns about water.
Yeah.
And they'll go find a scientist who'll say, don't worry, it's fine. And that's what they've done in every other community, because every community is worried about water. Every community tries that, and it has never worked. That's
Well, we could cite some of the operations this summer and,
Yeah.
stage
I-
4 in two
Yeah.
of our communities.
It's true, we could.
And
We
then-
certainly could do it. Anyway, I'll do something and it'll be done tomorrow.
Awesome.
So you'll send that-
Perfect.
I'll send it to all of you tomorrow.
That'd be great, David. Thank you for all that work. I think fantastic. Thank you, Maureen. Seeing us through this little wisdom.
That's it, folks.
I move to adjourn.
Okay, so move to adjourn. Probably don't have any food here.
Funny how that's never been at length.
No, we don't have time to do that, we have half an hour.
Okay.
So where are we? We've got 45 minutes.
45 minutes.
Oh, is it 5:30? I forgot.
It's 5:30.
So, what about that letter to Tim Johnson? Were you sending that or?
I guess not.
Yeah,
Nobody seems to want me to send
I
that.
think you could hold that.
I don't think.
Yeah.
I think we keep it up, because
Oh, yeah.
because who knows? I mean, they don't go destroy more records.
Keep it in reserve.
Starting to write these letters on a blank piece of paper is a real chore.
Yeah. While we're on the sort of rough topic, there's one other thing I wanted to do and I haven't done yet. It's a mineral staking reserve. It says in our OCP that we're not supposed to. And we're supposed to be, not have mining on Bowen Island, but the. Already.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Well, it depends which clock you're on.
Just so we're so far ahead, just.
It's 6:15 on this one.
Never happens.
Mine's 6:14 now.
Go ahead.
Thank you, folks. Late items, just the one?
Just a letter from Bob Turner in relation to item 4.1, the
Okay.
UNESCO nomination. And then an additional onto line that was just received tonight from David
Franco.
Manson regarding item 7.4 of the agenda, that's the Miller Road variance.
Yes.
And that is all.
Okay, thank you. Approval of the agenda? Michael, thank you, all in favor? All right. Public comments. Anybody, do you have anybody on the list?
One this evening, David Manson, Blue regarding agenda item 7.4A and B.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you regarding 7.4, particularly related to section B of 7.4. This the development variance permit application from the Little Red Church is really related to building a 10 by 12 ministerial office and a 5 by 7 storage area for the food bank. I've submitted two additional documents in addition to the survey that you have in your package that depicts where the two developments are to be, and also which outlines the current parking area as part of that survey. One document is a sketch of the parking area, which is dated August 29th, 2006, from the then Public Works Department, depicting the parking plan, which has since been employed and maintained as you see in the sketch. The other is an email correspondence from our surveyor, John Franco of Bennett Land Surveyors, outlining options for providing certified survey documents for easement purposes. In section B, the Public Works Department recommends that you authorize the mayor and staff to execute an easement over the part of Miller Road allowance currently occupied by our parking area, which continues to remain exactly as the sketch has shown. We at the church understand that the easement would be a benefit to both the United Church and the municipality. But before adopting the resolution as presented, we ask that you give serious consideration to the surveyor's comments in the email regarding registration of such previous easements and the options he offers, which would result from extracting survey data from the current topographical survey and avoid the need for additional costly formal easement survey. We would further ask that your authorization include direction to the staff in the same regard. Remain for any questions you may have when you're considering the resolutions. And thank you very much.
Okay, pleasure, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The consent agenda, which is fairly long. What, does anybody have anything they want to pull from that present time? Okay, we'll move on.
Hello.
Yeah, I know.
Good try, but no
Oh.
I know David didn't want to pull 3.5, but I guess I just want
Still going to?
comfort to know that we really are going to put the conduit underground at the same time as digging up the road.
I think Glenn confirmed that today by email.
Have an
Yeah,
email.
conversation. Yeah,
Okay,
that
but
is
we
the
haven't
plan.
really,
Yeah.
okay, all right, so I won't pull that one then. And 3.10.
Okay. Yes,
3.7.
7, okay. Is that it? Anybody else? Okay, thank you. So the council approved the items as outlined in September 8th, 2019 consent agenda as amended. Okay, David, Allison, thank you, all in favor? Thank you. Okay. Let's move on to the good stuff now. Bruce Simons. The lead, the House on Biosphere Region Initiative Society.
That's
Bring it on. Good to see you, Ruth. Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you. Thank you for having me this evening at your council meeting, and I'm here to ask for support for the nomination. The time has come. After 3 years and many, many months of working on the document, which is still in draft form, it's standard UNESCO Biosphere Reserve nomination form. We are at draft 100 and something, and it's still out for review. We're gathering beautiful photographs, so we welcome any of Bowen Island if you have high resolution shot for us to.
Even some of these ones from the 20s.
Yeah, that's very historical. I'm here to answer questions if you have any, but also to join the other communities so far: West Vancouver, Lions Bay, Sunshine Coast Regional Districts, Squamish-Lillooet. So the local governments so far are in support. We are working on the support from Forest Lands Natural Resource Operations, from BC Parks, and Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and Squamish Nation. The Squamish Nation have supported the nomination, subject to report from their Rights and Titles Office. We wouldn't expect any issues since United Nations and the biosphere reserves are all in support of United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. The Forest Lands Natural Resource Operations conversation is around the buffer zone between the edge of our high elevation parks, which are the parks that we're putting forward in our nomination as the core protected areas, and the timber harvest land base. So UNESCO Biosphere Reserves aim to have a contiguous buffer in order to achieve the objectives of biodiversity conservation. So that's a conversation we're still having. And that may be, it's going to be a process of seeing how UNESCO views our application and trying to get there.
Perfect. The thing in the biosphere area goes right up the Squamish River and all.
Yeah, right up to the valley. It's the watershed right up to Squamish, just below Whistler.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and it's the height of land.
Yeah. So that is the highest point there? No.
Well, the mountains, Garibaldi is, I think it's one of our highest peaks, but the watershed continues. But the scope of this is we cut it off at the same place that Flynn Road decided to for the cumulative effects assessment. So it follows that boundary exactly.
Well, I'm sure it would be amazing if it happened. It would be really fantastic.
Yeah, I did provide a summary, just kind of the highlights of what the objectives are and the governance structure of which is proposed, and we're in the process of course, of formulating and forming our roundtable. But the intention is to have a multi-sector roundtable, Squamish Nation to be co-hosting, co-chairing, and participating, of course. And through that we steer our way through remaining and work towards the objectives of the Biosphere Reserve.
Yeah, it looks good. It's a great presentation. Any questions? Allison?
Well, you know me, and I know I'm on the details, right?
Yeah.
So it says here, we're authorizing the mayor to provide a signature for section 5. Do we don't have a copy of the draft anywhere. What is section 5? Is it just a signature page, or are we saying something?
It is, yeah. It's, I did actually just last minute today provide a copy of that signature page, and because it's such a big document,
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Apparently.
It's very simple. there's no sort of declaration or anything, it's just the authorities over the core buffer and transition zones authorize or endorse this nomination, and then it's the content that's in here. I provided a table of contents in the document, and then my highlight over what those objectives are and what the governance structure is. So I do welcome questions, and if anybody would love to review, we're always looking for reviewers on our
Yeah.
I can only imagine. Ruth, can I ask, because I think Bob Turner brought this
Yes.
first to our attention some time ago. And I'm going to ask you, because when you hear the word UNESCO, you tend often to think of World Heritage
Right.
Sites.
Mhm.
And this is different, and I just wonder, because we do have an audience here as well, so there is no confusion. The difference between a World Heritage Site, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and a UNESCO biosphere. And
Right.
it would be educational, frankly, for me, just to make sure that you know, the difference, because I've said many of us perhaps have been to some of these.
Most people are not aware that they've been to a biosphere reserve, and there are 18 of them in Canada. So 2 on the west coast here are the Clayoquot Sound Biosphere and the Mount Arrowsmith. So when you travel over, you drive through Parksville, you're actually driving through Biosphere Town. So World Heritage Sites, more people are familiar with that because they're actually protecting tangible cultural and historical sites that are of international importance.
Yeah.
And they are, in order to become a World Heritage Site, you actually already have to have permanent protection on those sites. So it's very focused on the preservation of that cultural, archaeological heritage site. Whereas biosphere reserves are really aspirational towards the objectives of biodiversity conservation in a region. They're model regions for sustainable development. They are, and a biosphere region provides logistical support for ongoing learning, research, and monitoring. So it's less tangible. However, one of our core highlighted features that we're proposing as a core protected area are our glass sponge reefs. And the glass sponge reefs on the north coast are on the tentative list for World Heritage status. So CPAWS, that was successful in getting permanent protection for very large areas of glass sponge reefs up on the north coast in the Hecate Strait, was also successful in getting them on a tentative list, Canada's tentative list for World Heritage status. So that actually strengthens our application.
Perfect. Is the application in yet, or is it still?
No, it's in, we're hoping
Yeah.
to submit it in November, so for the House Sound Community Forum, and kind of to answer your question, we hope to have a final copy and an endorsement form there. In the meantime, if there are any, I need to kind of get the support going.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so now I've read what was sent me. So are we signing under 5.1 as an authority in charge of the management of core areas?
No.
Or are we signing under authorities elected local government
Yeah, that
recognized
one, yes.
of the communities located in the transition areas?
Right, yeah, yeah.
So, okay, so,
There's no, where all of the core areas are the high elevation parks.
okay,
And the glass sponge reefs. So Bowen is all in the transition.
okay.
Yeah.
Now, in the document, we talk about the conservation areas, the parks, and there are many small ones in this region, so that's all.
Very nice. Anybody else? Any further discussion, David?
I'd like to move the recommendation, but I need help with the pronunciation, if you could just...
Akatsum.
Akatsum? All right. The council endorsed the Akatsum Howe Sound nomination for UNESCO designation as a biosphere reserve and authorized the mayor to provide a signature for section 5 of the nomination document and to send a letter in support to the Howe Sound Biosphere Region Initiative Society.
Second that one.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Yay.
Yay, thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Ruth.
Good luck.
Good luck with the binder, by the way.
Yeah.
Don't lose it.
Thank you, Ruth. All right, then we're going to move down to staff reports. Shauna Jennings, Manager Rec and Community Services. Hi, Shauna.
Hello. Okay, so I'm here today is to go over this report that was provided to council for information on 2 points regarding the artificial turf field and its upcoming needed replacement. So just to give a little bit of history about the field for those of you who don't know, is that this field was built in 2009. And the funding for it had initially come from some community connections grants, recreation infrastructure grant, BIM reserve fund, and community donations. At the time that the field was built, they had indicated a 10 to 12 year lifespan. So here we are in 2019, 10 years later, and starting to look at replacement for the field. The field is largely used between about 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. just about every day. The community school uses the field, community recreation uses it, the Bowen Island Football Club, IPS, West Vancouver Field Hockey Club, and the community. And just to kind of give you a bit of a scale of what kind of hours we're looking at, community recreation does book the field for all the user groups, and we have about 400 hours booked for September to December for our fall session, which doesn't include the school use or the community use. So that is largely booked through IPS, the Bowen Island Football Club, and the West Vancouver Field Hockey Club, and community recreation programming. So just for an idea of how much the field is used. So as I said, we're nearing that lifespan of 10 to 12 years, and it is time to replace this. It's become a real community hub and offers a lot of opportunity for outdoor recreation on Bowen Island. The maintenance, Bowen Municipality has been doing the maintenance over this 10-year period, but you can see on the field now it is starting to show that wear and tear. The actual grass fibers have been splitting, and the infill is quite compacted. We've been mitigating the compacted infill by adding more of the infill to it biannually, but as the years go by, that cushioning does decrease on the field, which could result in increased risk of injury, which is why we need to be talking about replacement of it at this time. The replacement would be a major capital project, so consulting services would be required for the following deliverables, which would be project management of the project, an existing field review, so looking at the options for disposal of the current field, inspection of drainage and the infrastructure in the field, so making sure that that is still up to standards and ensuring the technical specifications that are required in providing a playing surface. Development and evaluation of tender would be another thing within the project scope for our project manager, and construction administration and inspection of the ongoing replacement. The other thing I would just like to flag for council is that staff is recommending a turf and infill product assessment. The infill that we currently have in this field is a coconut husk and cork infill, which was an alternative to rubber crumb in 2008. And it was more palatable and better received by the community to have this organic infill in this field. It has done its job over the 10 years. However, there have been some challenges with it, primarily that it breaks down quite easily, which causes more of a compacted playing surface, which can increase risk of injury. BIM has been mitigating that by adding more infill biannually at a cost of about $15,000 per year. So at this time, I would suggest that other infill products be looked at in the replacement, and there have been many different products that have emerged in the last 10 years. So there are some other options that have recently been used in the Lower Mainland and Whistler, who have just put in new fields. That analysis would require just cost-benefit analysis of looking at those alternative infill products, and that analysis would involve the lifespan of those products, the cost, ongoing maintenance, the environmental impact, as well as the reuse and the recyclability of the product at the end of its lifespan. I have spoken to 3 consulting firms who specialize in building turf fields in the Lower Mainland, and an estimate has come in to do that, just that piece, that infill analysis at between $3,000 and $3,600, and that money has already been allotted in the 2019 municipal approved budget. Replacement estimates of the entire surface of the turf field run approximately between $200,000 and $350,000. That largely depends on which infill is chosen to be in the field. And that will be something that we'll be requesting in the 2020 municipal budget. And the proposed timeline on that would be summer 2020. That would be the least, disruptive to user groups to have it done in the summer, and it's about a 4 to 6 week time frame to complete the replacement. So just then to bring to my second purpose for this report, since we are talking about replacement, staff has been approached by the Bowen Island Football Club to examine the feasibility of putting in a full-size turf field on the Bowen Island Community School site. Bowen Island Football Club formed in 2009, and they are the largest user of the turf field currently. They've done a lot of fundraising, come up with donations, expanded the grass field in order to meet the needs of some of their programming over the years, and they've recently done a feasibility study that basically determined that they need more field time in order to meet the demands of their membership as well as expand their programming. As I said at the beginning, the field is fairly booked, and in order for them to grow as a club, they are coming forward with the suggestion that perhaps a full-size field might be something to look at when we're in this replacement mode. At this point, that is exploratory, and my understanding is that more information would be coming from the football club if it was desired by council in the way of a delegation. I did also receive quotes from the consulting firms that I spoke to with regards to a feasibility study to determine whether or not a full-size field would actually fit on the school site. And those quotes came in between $4,000 and $7,000 to do that feasibility study. ST45 being a key stakeholder, we have had brief initial conversations with them where there seems to be a positive attitude behind that. However, that would need to be formally discussed. The estimated cost of a full-size turf field is between $1.5 and $1.8 million. That would include lighting and infrastructure. And the funding source for a full-size field is unknown at this time. So just to wrap that up and bringing these recommendations forward, firstly, looking at next steps for the actual replacement of the turf field that we currently have. Next steps there would be to move forward with that cost-benefit analysis and start the consultants looking at the turf and infill product analysis, and that would be done anyway. The second purpose was to bring this information regarding an option of a full-size turf field forward, and possibly I can answer a few questions about that if that is something the council would like, or if we should move forward with exploring that as an option towards getting more information before council.
Thank you, Shauna. Any questions? Maureen?
Just a little backstory. When the turf field was originally built, I don't really know all the details of it. Was it exclusively a municipal expenditure, or were there other partners?
There were partners in the grant writing process. So we partnered with West Vancouver Schools, and I believe it was the Community Connections grant that was a partnership.
Do you know roughly how much it cost initially?
The initial field was just over $500,000.
And what is the difference between the current field and a full-size field? Is there,
It's roughly half. The one that we currently have is about half the size of a full-size regulation field.
so the issue of whether we have the land to even be able to do that?
Is definitely something that if we were to have a consultant do a feasibility study, that would be something that we would look at. One of the suggestions has been that the full-size field would run parallel to the road, using the current turf field as part of the end zone. My understanding is the current turf field would also have to be widened about 5 meters.
So you would lose part of the grass field then?
Yes.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, so
Probably 2/3 of it.
you would probably lose most of the grass field, other than where the backstop is. At that far end, that would still be grass. So we would not have a full size, we wouldn't have a grass field that would be playable for a sport, other than the t-ball or a small young kids baseball possibly.
Rob?
Just Shawna, so West Van Field Hockey Club, just to get an idea, do they rent the field, I guess?
They rent the field from us, yes.
From you,
Yeah,
yeah.
and they come over and run their program here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And roughly, what kind of maintenance costs are we looking at for maintaining?
Yes, so for the grass field, we look at about $15,000 annually to maintain. The turf field maintenance is about $8,000 in labor, plus the $15,000 in infill.
It's,
Thanks, Sean. And I do recognize that this is extremely well used, and it's a great facility. There's been a lot of change over the last few years in the development of these. So would a new facility, presumably if you had a different kind of crumb, whatever it would be, you wouldn't have that additional cost of having to replace it every year?
That's right. So they do need some top-up of
Yeah,
infill
but not that-
occasionally, but it's
not
more
the
like on a
same.
3 to 5 year
Right.
cycle of doing that. It wouldn't be an every year thing and occurrence. And the different infill products don't break down. They're not organic necessarily. They don't break down into, what we've seen here is that it breaks down into like dirt, which I am guessing is probably leading to some of the challenges we're having with drainage at the moment as well.
So I guess my next question then is would the potential a new field last longer with changes in various products and so on? Is that possible?
I haven't seen anything that's lasted more than 12 to 15 years. They are still saying that would be the lifespan. I do know that one of the infill products, the actual, what's called TPE, and it is a food grade plastic. It can be put into a new field at the end of this field's life. It's mixed with sand. Whistler has just put in a full-size turf field using that product, and the TPE can last for 2 fields worth of life, so 24 to 30 years.
So I guess I was wondering about, sort of the consultant spend to sort of figure out these decisions, but I can see some of the complexities that you're talking about. I guess I have no other questions. I mean, I'm generally in support of this, and I would hate to see the actual grass field get smaller, but the users can figure out what to do, not me. So I'm happy to be supportive of all the things that you say here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Maureen?
Currently, the turf field and the grass field can be used at the same time.
Yes.
Yes. So if we have one larger turf field, the impact on programming and availability could potentially reduce.
It would, I don't think so. It will increase. The grass field is only used for games on Saturdays and Sundays, and the reason for that is that with our climate and weather and the wet, the grass field gets damaged quite easily. So we try and save it for for games. The soccer club actually doesn't do any of their practices on the grass field for that reason. The full-size turf field would be, when they were talking about doing practices, they would split that into two or three groups. Whereas now they can only have one group on the current turf field. And also with their co-ed program, which is a 6 versus 6 adult league that happens on the turf field, they would split a full-size field into two. They could have 2 games going at the same time. So the number of people on the large-size turf field at one time would increase, which increases their field access. And that's quite standard. If you see fields in North Van or West Van, there's always more than one group or activity or happening at one time, unless it is a full-size 11v11 game.
If we were to go for the more modest replacement, which she said was,
200 to 350,000.
are there funds in reserve for that?
My understanding is that we do have funds in reserve
That's what
from user fees over the last 10 years.
actually, the bylaw said we were supposed to put funds into a reserve for replacement, but I don't see any funds having been put into specific replacement for the field, so the replacement of the field would come from the capital renewal and replacement fund.
On that note, what would the cost sharing look like if it from a bigger field? I mean, it's on school district property. Would they be interested in coming along?
My
The
understanding.
soccer club, how much are they gonna put in? Because that's an incredible amount of money they're municipality.
Yes, and the soccer club does have some provisions within their feasibility study of providing some investment. That would be something that we would need to explore as part of this exploration. The school district, at my first conversation, was that there would not be funds coming from the school district.
Okay.
There's also grant opportunities, and the soccer club is a nonprofit thing to apply for grants that we may or may not be able to. So that might be something that that is a possibility. I guess time is of the essence on all of it if we're to do the replacement for summer 2020.
Okay, what else is there, Rob?
So this proposal was brought forth by the soccer club, football club, and get the right name, at the last rec commission meeting, and I think everybody was interested in it. We didn't pass any formal resolutions or anything, and I got the feeling they were certainly willing to try and step up with money and time and everything else. So,
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we can't sort of do a lot of that until we know that council would be using.
It's early days, unfortunately, like you say, there is some time. Rob,
Yeah, I guess my only concern is, and I think it's good, obviously, to do the feasibility first and get a bit of a clearer picture. But that we're sort of getting hopes of like $1.5 million is the total number, right? And I don't know how often we would need to spend that again, because obviously that's the concrete and all that this field sits in, which may have a 30-year lifespan, and
Right.
maybe even for another $1.5 million. And then obviously recovering that surface as well. So I guess I'm just raising it as a concern that, this is, we don't have this money at all, right? So how much of this is, can we, through a grant, for instance, I don't know, are there grants out there for soccer fields that are like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars? And
I believe there are. That would be something that we would need to research and explore.
And just a follow-up question on the feasibility study with Bowen FC. Are they planning to pitch in on the cost for the feasibility study, or is
That's a conversation that still needs to be had with Bone FC, but would be within the plan of moving forward.
Yeah, so I think the general feeling is there's obviously some interest in pushing this forward, and it's not, certainly not a no by any stretch of the imagination, but the amount of money is considerable, so that has to be taken into consideration. But early days, so maybe I'll just read the recommendation. The council received for information the turf field project information report dated August 26, 2019, and the council directs staff to explore options with the Bowen Island Football Club to determine the feasibility of building a full-size turf field on Bowen Island Community School lands. Got a second to that? Thank you. Further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Thank you, it's unanimous. Thanks, Shauna.
Great.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Thank you.
And now on to Emma. Thank you, Emma.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Bringing for introduction, Development Variance Permit DBP 06-2019. This is for 971 Seaview Place. It is located in the Cates Hill neighborhood, just next to Snug Cove here on the east side of the island. This is a fairly small property, 0.1 hectares. The setbacks from the property lines shown here in the hash black line. The applicant applied for and received a building permit in December 2016 for a house that was proposed sited right up against the side lot line as shown here. In 2017, forms were poured without a survey. The applicant had submitted a letter which is included in the staff report, and the letter notes that there was a conversation with the building inspector that did not require a survey to proceed with pouring the forms. Section 3.51 of the land use bylaw does allow for a building inspector to not require the survey if they determine that a survey is not reasonably necessary for establishing compliance with siting regulations. As you can see with this proposed development, siting compliance would appear to require a survey. And in 2018, the new building inspector, Greg Cormier, did require a survey for this building permit application. A survey was submitted earlier this year which showed that the house was in fact built within the side setback, and because of the topography of this lot, that caused the house to exceed the maximum allowed height as well as encroaching on the setback. So in April of this year, the homeowners submitted a development variance permit application to address these non-compliances. The variance application is asking for two variances. One is to reduce the side setback from 3 meters to 2.5 meters for a corner that is encroaching in the side setback, as well as increasing the maximum allowed height by 0.16 meters, about half a foot, to account for the increase in overall height. Given that this is a fairly minor variance and the applicant has shown intent to comply, staff is recommending that council go ahead with public notice for consideration of this application at their next meeting, September 30th.
Thank you, Emma. Any questions?
Shall I read the recommendation?
Yeah, I guess, I'm not gonna say, how does this ever happen? It happens. And it's, get it out and see what the neighbors think.
So I move that notice be given that council will be considering the issuance of development variance permit DBP 06-2019 for the variance of side setback and height for 971 Seaview Place, legally described as lot 38 DCP 15-102, District Lot 489, Route 1, PID 026153448 at the September 30th, 2019 meeting of council. The council authorized staff to give notice for the consideration of issuance of development variance permit DBP 06-2019 in accordance with section 499 of the Local Government Act to all properties within 100 meters of the legal boundary of 971 Seaview Place legally described as Lot 38, BCT 15102, District Lot 489, Route 1, PID 026, 15354.
Second. David, thank you. Any further discussion on this one? Okay, all in favor? Thank you, that is unanimous. Thanks, Emma, on that one. And sit tight. And Michelle, Island Community Planner.
A lot of variances tonight.
Yeah, that's right. Get them all out of the way.
Let's set that up.
So the next variance, going in chronological order, we're at DVP 07-2019. This is for 375 Cardina Drive. And this property is actually in Snug Cove, directly north of the ferry terminal. It is also the property of the Bowen Island Marina. This lot is split zoned, with the northern portion being in settlement residential 2, and the southern portion of the lot is zoned village commercial 2B. The subject building of the variance application is entirely within the residential zoning. It is an existing single detached house with 2 levels. The upper level is 1 unit, and the lower level is actually made up of 2 units. The smaller of the 2 has been recently decommissioned, but the larger of the 2 is actually has a floor area greater than allowed for a secondary suite. So the variance application is asking for an increase from the 90 square meters allowed to 117.6 square meters, which is about 30% increase in the maximum allowed floor space. Other considerations for council: this property is within OCP designation Snug Cove Residential, which does support increased residential development and alternative forms of housing, which could be seen as larger rental units that could accommodate family, has easy access to transportation services and shops. This type of housing has been shown there's a need for this type of housing, especially in the Cove, and this property is also the subject of an active rezoning application right now, asking for increased residential development to allow for this second suite in the house. So given that this application appears to be consistent with the OCP land use designation and does provide needed rental housing, staff is recommending that council go ahead with public notice for consideration of DVP 07-2019 at the next meeting on September 30th.
All right, any questions?
Yeah. Could you go back to the floor plan? So the decommissioned suite.
That's the brown one?
Yeah. Yes. When was it decommissioned? Do you know?
Well, the building inspector verified it in August. I'm not sure exactly when the work was done.
Okay. So prior to that, there were 2 livable secondary suites
Yes.
in the building, and under our current bylaws, we would not allow 2 secondary suites in the one residence.
Yeah. And the alternative to variance would be to reduce the floor area of this suite. And as mentioned in the report, there's no internal access between the upper and lower floors. So that means instead of being able to reallocate the usable floor area to the main unit, you would have to just reduce it.
Fill it with sand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is.
And so is that where the 2 X's are? The part they decommissioned?
No, those, that is what the applicant had proposed. If they were not able to get the variance, they would essentially close off those
That's
2
right.
units.
Yeah.
So that's on one floor. Is there more than is there another floor?
Yes, the upper floor
Upstairs.
is.
So there's
the main-
another,
is the
the main residence is
Yes.
underneath floor. Okay. Were these existing or have they been built since? their new ownership?
The suites below?
Yes.
I'm not sure about the history, but bylaw does have a record from last year showing that there were 2 suites.
Okay.
Have they been used at all for Airbnb? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay, can I ask you, this is to go ahead and I can see exactly what we want to do in terms of this type of accommodation. Is there any restriction on future use? But let us just say that we all agree to this, and then we find it listed on Airbnb. Is there any, if we were to go ahead and approve this, is there any restriction on future use?
Is that the land use bylaw or something, maybe for secondary?
Yeah, it's restricted already in the land use bylaw that secondary suites can't be used for
Oh,
short-term rental.
can't be used for short-term. I get that, but I know, but I'm just concerned. I guess I'm just asking. I hope we go ahead and I hope this will provide some excellent accommodation. I would just like to know, or whatever we could arrange it, that is the way it's going to continue to be used. My simplistic approach to this one is great. We're going to provide some extra accommodation. I think most people would, let's see how we can make that work. But is that what we're actually doing? And then sort of feeling that when they go forward, that use is in some way protected.
Well, we can, and they're gonna come back for rezoning. They're gonna try to get some more zoning. At that point in time, I would think, Daniel, that we could put some restrictions on it. Yeah.
There's also active discussion just now within the Housing Advisory Committee regarding some regulations related to the suites, essentially. So something would be coming, I think, to council within the next 2 months is what we are aiming for. And it may actually have an impact on this. Am I correct?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, anyway. Yeah, we can do that.
Right. So if those discussions proceed, part of the problem here might disappear.
Interesting. I don't have a problem with it. Anybody else have any discussion on this?
Well, I think we have to be, I mean, we're not making a decision right now, so I'm fine
No, we're just
talking
throwing
about
it
the
out there, yeah.
development variance, but I mean, it is an increase in terms of the 90 square
Yeah.
meter
Right.
maximum, and we have I mean, we've stuck to it, with the exception, with the odd case in the past.
Being one that didn't like the 90 square feet maximum in the first place, because
Yeah.
it makes it very limiting for a family.
Yeah.
So in this
Sure.
way, you've got 2 bedrooms.
Three.
Or is it 3, well, is it 3?
Storage.
Well, the storage has no window in it, so it can't be good. So you've got 2 bedrooms at least, and, you know, this one area is big enough, it could almost be a third in the front here. So you've got space for a family and room for kids to play.
So what I'm hearing is that it sounds as though council is moving on the potential maximum for a secondary suite, and perhaps might consider favorably having 2 suites in a home rather than just one.
I don't think that's a discussion we're having right
I
I see where you're going with that.
I was expressing my personal.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? And we're just, at this point in time, we're just moving
Okay,
this
somebody
ahead.
else has to read it this time.
Yeah, for sure.
Read it,
Somebody else
would you
read
like?
that. Yeah, thanks, Hope.
That notice be given that council will be considering the issuance of development variance permit DBP 07-2019 for the variance of maximum floor area for a secondary suite for 375 Fredina Drive, legally described as Lot A, EPP 33316 DL 490 5314 7975 PID 029 311 284 at the September 30th meeting of council. That council authorized staff to give notice for the consideration of issuance of development variance permit DBP 07-2019 in accordance with section 499 of the Local Government Act to all properties within
100 meters of the legal boundary of 375 Pardita Drive, legally described as Lot A, EPP 33316, District Lot 490, 5314, 7975, PID 029311284.
Thank you. And second to Rob. Further discussion?
No.
No? All in favor? Thank you. Right. Thank you, Emma. Okay, so Jennifer Pierce. You're up.
Mayor, councilors. You're welcome.
Good evening.
First council.
First council meeting, yeah.
Okay, I'll be talking about two variances to this. This is the first one. And I believe he's Kevin here. No, he was. Okay, so we're doing, it's a little bit unusual. We have two reports from two different departments on the same lot. So Kevin will be presenting the public works side and I'll be presenting the planning department side. So the variance permit application in question is DBP 08-2019. It's concerning the United Church at 1122 Miller Road. And earlier today, you had a member of the public here to discuss the same proposal.
Good evening.
Okay, so this is the Bowen Island United Church, also known as the Little Red Church. And you can see its view from the street with the parking area in the front, a fence, and the buildings in the rear. In terms of its location on the site, it's near the Snug Cove area in the Deep Bay neighborhood. On the far right, you'll see an aerial photo with an orangey yellow hash delineating the site boundary and the blue line delineating the parking area. So you can see that the parking is external to the lot boundary. The proposal is for two new additions, one onto Collins Hall, which is the building on the upper right corner of the lot, and that is for a new office space in 10-foot by 12-foot size, and a smaller one off of the worship space on the lower left-hand corner that's 5 by 7 to expand food bank storage capacity. Both of these additions are intruding into the allowable setback, and so are the pre-existing buildings on this site. This building is from about the 1930s, so it was sort of grandfathered into a zoning district with 7.5 meter setbacks on all sides, which is not within on any of those sides. And particularly not in the front where the building is nearly on the lot line and the new addition is about 1 meter away from it. So it's very close to some of the lot lines there just in the existing building. So even though the additions are quite modest, they're calling for some variance to the setback, to the lot coverage, and then also to the parking. Okay, so this is just some images showing how the office addition and the food bank storage addition are in keeping with the general character of the existing building. So in summation, they're looking for several variances here: the front setback, the side setbacks, the lot coverage, and the minimum parking. So I believe then Kevin will talk about the public works aspect.
When they applied for the permits and stuff, we realized that the parking lot is 100% on the road allowance. So typically we would want an easement from them, a legal easement, just so all liability issues and stuff are taken care of. We ask that for anyone who occupies the road right away or builds anything on the road right away. Always request for an easement. Yeah, the number of parking spots, that's not concerned. If they get the easement, then that's all taken care of the issue. So,
yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
yeah,
I guess, how did they ever have that right of way over there in front of the church? What was it going to be used for? Because the road's
the road shifts. It goes back and forth on the road. It goes.
Oh, it does.
Hard over one way and then hard over another way.
Yeah.
And yeah, we didn't know until this came up.
Yeah.
It's just always been there.
Another bonus.
Exactly.
Another bonus.
It's been there, right? So no one
A
ever.
little divine intervention.
Yeah. Yeah, I certainly, could you go back to the site plan there? Thank you, Jen. I don't see a problem with that. This one's tucked into the corner of the building. It's also for food bank storage. The office, I mean, the whole thing is, not conforming anyway, so adding another building and not conforming, that's up to the neighbors and to decide whether it comes with those. Allison?
Well, food storage right now is underneath pews in the church, so
Yeah.
this will be a little better, a little more secure and a little more accessible. So we had a presentation from David Manson on the public comment section. Is this easement or statutory or right away, whatever it's going to be, actually going to be registered on title?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so that would mean the proper official
Yeah.
survey,
Yeah.
because the surveyor had commented that he'd done several easement plans before and they actually haven't been registered.
Yeah, we
So-
registered. Yeah.
Okay, so this one will be actually registered, okay. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I've got one question. I'm very pleased, by the way, that they're putting the food bank storage addition on, and I think it's perfectly self-evident and speaks for itself. And it's obviously designed to fit in with the architecture of the building. You can see that to remain the sort of character and form of the building. They've very carefully done it. I just hope, going to look at it, that it's actually large enough for the purpose. And the only question I would ask was, we're going to do this, is it, and I seem to answer here, but is it giving them what they need, or are they having to shoehorn this in because anything else would present great architectural difficulties in terms of the nice, excuse the expression, the niceness of the presentation? If they're satisfied with the space, then it's absolutely fine. I just raised the fact that if they're having to do it just because of, because 5 by 7, once you get racks and it's a small space. If they're satisfied with it, then who are we to argue? I just hope that it is satisfactory. This is a great service to the community. And I just would be very sympathetic if they said, well, the reason we did it this size is because anything else would be extremely difficult to get through for obvious reasons. So if they are happy with it, well, that's wonderful. And I just hope that it's being done because they feel it's not enough space, and not just because they feel they must do it, because it's the only way they can make architectural sense of it. So I'll leave that maybe to you, because this one's going to go out for further discussion. But I raised the point, 5 by 7, once racked up, is a relatively small amount of space for an addition. And I hope it's enough for these good people to continue doing the excellent work they do.
Thank you. Anybody else? No, yeah, I think we should move this on to see what kind of reaction we get from the neighbors and see if they're happy, okay with it. Just this letter from David.
I was just asking about that. The registered survey, they're going to register, so they need the proper.
Yes. So they need a proper survey.
Yeah.
I'll be able to use this, just trying to save some money here, but
Yeah.
I think it's probably going to need something a little bit more official, unfortunately. All right, so who wants to read this recommendation? Everybody
Oh, well,
Fight over it.
There you go for Rob.
there's a
Rob,
lot
go
of
ahead.
dashes in it, okay. I'd like to move that notice be given that council will consider the issuance of a development permit, DVP-08-2019, for the variance of the maximum lot coverage, minimum setback, and off-street parking spaces for 1122 Miller Road, legally described as Lot J, District Lot 1628, Plan 20314, PID 006-644-619 at September 30th, 2019 meeting of council. That council authorized staff to give notice for the consideration of issuance of a development variance permit, DVP-08-2019, in accordance with Section 499 of the Local Government Act, to all properties within 100 meters of the legal boundary of 1122 Miller Road, legally described as Lot J, District Lot 1628, Plan 20314, PID 006-644-619.
Second. Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor on this one? Thank you, that is unanimous. And,
Do you want to do the second one here there?
sure, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Whereas the parking lot at 1122 Miller Road, the United Church, was historically built in the municipal road allowance, and there are no legal agreements associated with it, therefore be it resolved that council authorize the mayor and corporate officer to execute an easement over part of Miller Road for the purpose of providing a parking lot to the United Church.
Okay, Allison on the second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Also unanimous. Perfect. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
Guess you can leave now. Jennifer, you're staying with us for the next one.
One more.
What about number B? All right, go ahead.
We did it.
We did it.
Yeah. Okay, so the second development variance permit that I'll be presenting is DBP 09, 2019. This is at the property 334 Cardina Road. Okay, here's the site. It's a single-family residence in the Snug Cove area. You can see the larger photo is the front of the dwelling, and then the other two show the rear. It's located on the very tip of that peninsula at Snug Cove. And the odd thing about the site is that there's actually two lots, and the house straddles the boundary between the two lots. And so what that means is that basically any development on this site is within the setback of the sea because it's less than 60 meters across. And anything that's near the center will be in the middle of a side lot setback. So they're looking for a variance on the side lot setback and the setback to the sea. So the proposal is for some work rebuilding the existing deck, slightly smaller, fixing some footings. That's on the back of the lot, which is on the right of the drawings. And on the left of the drawings is the front of the home, where they'll be enclosing an existing roofed porch and making that part of the home. They'll be putting a kitchen in there, and then making a new entrance porch where they currently have a Japanese maple tree. You can see that red circle. So they'll be taking that tree and relocating it elsewhere in their garden, and making some kind of stone pathways and different changes to the landscaping of the garden to make the new entrance nice again. So, yeah, that's
Questions? Okay, good.
Most awkward looking lot I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's right.
It was a nice site visit.
Nice idea.
Very, very pretty. Okay, so I'll read this one. The notice be given the council will be considering the issuance of development variance permit DBP 09-2019 for the variance of sea and side lot setbacks for 334 Cardina Road, legally described as lot 33 and 34, plan 11088, block 3, district lot 490, PID 009-163 to 417 and 009-163-409 at the September 30th, 2019 meeting of council. Council authorized staff to give notice for the consideration of the issuance of development variance permit DBP 09-2019 in accordance with section 499 of the Local Government Act to all properties within 100 meters of the legal boundary of 334 Cardina Road, legally described as lot 33 and 34, plan 11088, block 3, district lot 490, PID 009-163-417 and 009-163-409.
Awesome.
Second that, thanks Rob. And any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you, unanimous. Awesome. Thank you, Jen. Very nice. Great job. All right, Daniel.
Okay, so the final variance permit application of the night. This is at 1495 Williams Road, so it's located below Eagle Cliff on the east side of Bowen Island. And so like many lots on Bowen, it seems more straightforward than it is in reality. So Bannister Road comes in off of Eagle Cliff, so you'll run along here, and then curves down to Williams Road. But when you look at the actual built environment, so Bannister splits about here, and Williams Road cuts this corner and then cuts up here. And so this portion is actually quite a significant cliff
Yeah.
along the side. This is going to turn a little bit to show you better. So the house itself is built right in this bottom corner. So it's built quite close on this side and on this side. The lot continues flat and then starts to drop off quite significantly about here down to the sea. And this portion of the lot as well is a larger rock outcrop that rises higher, that the owner finds is quite a feature of the site and doesn't want any development to have to take out that rock outcropping. So what the applicant is proposing is to rebuild the house on roughly the existing footprint. So you see this footprint and the extension here. So just showing, okay, this is the property line, and that's the required setback from both sides. You can see that the house itself goes in on all sides, and the deck currently actually goes across the property line of the neighbors, and the neighbor's garage crosses their property line. It's awesome. So what's proposed is to replace the house, maintaining the existing setback, to remove the deck, and to just build within those setbacks to the front and the side. All right, so recommending notice be given to consider the September 30th meeting.
Discussion?
I think given the topography, you just have to think it's wonderful that someone will care that much to build something that will, look after the environment it's situated in.
Yeah. Any other discussion, questions?
Daniel, this is sort of demolishing the house and building a
They're
completely
demolishing the
new
house and rebuilding a completely new house, yeah.
How much bigger is the house?
So the house, so it extends further towards the sea on this little L shape, but this part maintains the same footprint. Yeah, and I think the report, the house was built in the 50s. It is quite aged and could be replaced. Yes.
It's a typical cottage.
Yeah.
And if I take it from reading the report, the neighbor immediately across the street and the ones immediately adjacent on either side are fine with their.
Yeah.
Already, Gary, I'll read the recommendation.
Sure.
That notice be given that council will be considering the issuance of development variance permit DVP 10-2019 for the variance of reduced front and side lot lines for 1495 Williams Road, legally described as Lot C, Block 6 to 9, District Lot 1552, Plan 10276, PID 009421327 of the September 30th, 2019 meeting of council, and that council authorized staff to give notice for the consideration of issuance of development variance permit DVP 10-2019 in accordance with Section 499 of the Local Government Act to all properties within 100 meters of the legal boundary of 1495 Williams Road, legally described as Lot C, Blocks 6 to 9, District Lot 1552, Plan 10276, PID 009421327.
Thank you, Maureen. Further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. It's unanimous. Okay, Dennis Martin. Enough of those. Move on to something else. See you around.
Okay, so on a different note, I have tonight just an update on the business license bylaw and business license program that we started in January of this year. So just for background, so in October of last year, council adopted our first business license bylaw, bylaw 465. And during the adoption process of that bylaw, council directed staff to report in September 2019 as to the effectiveness of the business licensing program with any proposed adjustments to inform the 2020 budget process. So that's what I'm here today to do, is to provide you the update on the business licensing program. So the report has the numbers of applications, and I'll note this is as of August 15th, 2019, so that's when we compiled the numbers before our business license inspector was going on vacation for 2 weeks, so we compiled all the numbers to put in the report. But so as of that date, we received 293 applications, and we issued 227 licenses in total. Checking today, we're up to 312 applications, so they continue to come in as time goes on. And then you can see then, so of the 293, 66 had not been issued yet. This number was quite high, the 47 not picked up, but in part because tests before going away had issued a large number of them that were just there, so I would imagine by now more of them have been picked up. But So 66 waiting to be issued, and you can see the breakdown in terms of largely waiting for a fire inspection or for building changes. Some because they're incomplete, and some waiting on building changes that don't comply with the current zoning. And as an ongoing basis, staff Tess has been contacting businesses that are known that either have not yet submitted an application, and that are part of either they're in the phone book, they're a physical presence, they're on one of our mailing lists. And so of those, there's about 190 contacts that Tess has in her list who are either not yet submitted an application or not yet indicated that they're no longer operating a business on Bowen. So some of them may not be operating anymore, but they just haven't contacted us to tell us to stop sending them emails. So in terms of revenue, so as of August 15th, we've received about $13,000 in permanent revenue for the 180 licenses. But the 47 outstanding have more, and the 66 outstanding more than that. So doing the math, of all 293 applications went forward, we'd have year-end revenue of about $25,000. I'll just go through the different headings from the actual report itself, so this is sort of the high level. So staff priority is to explore online and credit card payments, especially for the 2020 renewals. So applications that already have a license number are easier to track internally, and so exploring the ways that people can renew their licenses in a much easier manner. And on that, we've also hired a contractor to begin to develop an online registry, and they're anticipating doing an internal page this fall with a public page to launch in November of 2019. So that would allow people looking for a business on Bowen to actually search online on our website to find, okay, who are all the licensed, whatever it may be, massage therapists, plumbers, contractors, whatever. And so as a way to actually find out, okay, I want to have hire somebody on Bowen and who's there. In terms of reviewing applications, so one major piece has been the fire department conducting fire inspections of businesses, and that's been held up in time too with the one fire chief retiring and the next one coming in. There's been sort of a lag in there, and trying to figure out, streamline our process. At the same point as well, on the initial applications, confirming occupancy of buildings is quite time consuming for staff. And then if there's required renovations, it can result in unexpected costs for applicants. And so I note in the report, that's often a common one, or has come up when people change the use of a building from what was permitted. So when you get a permit, your occupancy permit will say, well, you're permitted to be a blank, whatever it is, or a category or a class of occupancy. And change in the occupancy can result in changes that you need for the building code. As I say in the report, formally on Bowen, there's never a process of actually getting caught for that. You could just kind of do it, and there wouldn't be any consequences. Or the previous owner could do it. So somebody could build, a common one, sort of somebody builds a workshop and then turns it into a bed and breakfast place, and now it's a dwelling, or now it's a residence, and it has requirements for fire access and things like that never came up until suddenly now, when we're saying, well, where's your, what's your occupancy for? And they say, well, I had a building permit, it had an occupancy, it should be fine. And we have to say, well, no, it's not. Now you need to put in whatever, maybe it's a new window or something. But it's been interesting as we work through each of the cases. In terms of feedback, and I've just listed here negative ones, which isn't always fair, but leading cause of complaints, let's say we get our businesses that are located in the municipality, but do businesses online, it's going to feel like, well, we're not really a business present on Bowen, why do we need a business license? You say, well, it captures everyone, it doesn't matter in that sense. And then we also get some feedback from smaller businesses saying, why do I pay the same fee as larger ones? So I know when we created the bylaw, one of the rationales was we want a simple fee structure and not have to get places do it by employees or square footage or revenue or income or all these different metrics people use to say, okay, now you're bigger and you need to pay more. And we purposely tried to say, okay, we want a really clean fee structure that's really straightforward. Well, the flip of that is then smaller places say, well, why do I have to pay the same as the bigger place? So there's always a trade-off. And then the report discusses that some regulatory tools. So municipalities use business license bylaws to regulate businesses and regulate impact, especially on neighbors and on the public. So one of the things that was discussed when we're adopting it is the potential for short-term rentals. And saying, well, we would address that as part of the short-term rental review and not specifically this report. And then the other one that has come up is kennels, so people keeping dogs.
Yeah.
So staff recommend we actually include kennel regulations in the business license bylaw to limit impact on neighbors. And that's one of the recommendations in the report. The other one we talked on, so when the EDC did their initial report on the business license bylaw, one of the things they talked about, some places do is business license for secondary suites or business license for any dwelling rentals. So some communities do that, not all, it's not universal, but some do, and it was the motion at the time is to bring it as a phase 2. So what the report talks about in discussion is Bowen Island only legalized secondary suites in 2008. We legalized detached secondary suites in 2016. So we have many secondary suites on Bowen. I would imagine they're similar to the one on Cardina that we saw in the variance permit tonight that don't meet the current standards. So they're too big. Would be a common one if before we had a 90 square meter size. If we put in a secondary suite, they could put any size, and it may be too big for the current standards, or it doesn't meet the 40%. So if right now you have a secondary suite that's the same size as your main dwelling, it's not permitted. It has to be no more than 40% of the total floor area of the house. So again, it may not even be able to be legalized. So the staff had concerns about that, about impact on secondary suites. And we said every secondary suite you need a business license, and to get a business license, you need to show you occupancy for the secondary suite. Could see the loss of secondary suite units on Bowen. So for that one, staff recommending referring consideration of phase 2 to the Community Economic Development Committee and the Housing Advisory Committee for recommendations and consideration of other community approaches, even looking at, okay, how do other communities approach it? Do they require business licenses or not? And if they do, is there something built in where they can address those concerns of losing secondary suites in the push to get occupancy permits for all secondary suites? And so finally, enforcement strategy. So the strategy at the time of adoption and going forward has been on education and awareness of the new business license bylaw. So it's approaching businesses we know are operating to encourage them and to educate them on the new business license bylaw and to apply. And at the time, non-compliance. So in our bylaws, non-compliance may be addressed through compliance notices and associated fines. We haven't issued any warning notices and focus on that education and awareness. But I note here, I don't have a recommendation, but I know at some point, the enforcement strategy should involve compliance notices to businesses operating without a business license, and fairness to those businesses who have applied and aren't paying their business license fee. So in terms of recommendations in the report, what we had is, and this is a synopsis, but to bring forward amendments to include business license regulations for kennels. Council directs staff to not require business license for attached or detached secondary suites in 2020. And that council refer the business license update report to the Community Economic Development Committee and the Housing Advisory Committee for comment on the implementation of phase 2 and to report back to council. That's the answer to the questions. Yep.
Great, thank you very much. Just one question I've got is if you referenced that if a suite was legal when they put it in before and it's not legal now.
Sorry, I meant before 2008, there were no regulations. We didn't allow it.
Oh, I see.
And there was no minimum size, so people put them in.
Yeah.
Right, all over, and now they may not fit our minimum grade. So they built it without, or they may have built the house with a building permit, but not the suite. And the suite they put in is bigger, or is some things that may not be able to comply. Or the other one is just they put it in, but they don't have any records of the separation and the drywall that was installed.
Oh,
so
yeah.
they would now need to upgrade, and a certain percent of people may not be willing to do that, and means they take out the suite.
Yeah, well, they weren't legal when they put them in service.
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah.
Say anything about it. Maureen?
Thanks, Daniel. I'm really glad to see this come forward after the 9-month period. It's great to see it, and I'm very glad that there's going to be the rollout of online payment and the directory, because that was something that was really emphasized in the Community Economic Development Committee as being a genuine value associated with getting a business license. I just had some questions concerning the number of applications. So I wonder if you could go back to that slide. Okay, so you've got the 293 and then 227. Have any applications been outright rejected at this point? Is that the application incomplete category?
No, so no applications have been rejected. So there are 5 that we noted as not complying with the current zoning.
Okay.
Requirements zoning change.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think offhand, and I can recall at least 3 of them that I've met with, maybe 4 of which. So one is the Bowen Marina, has some components that don't comply with the current zoning. there's a few others that we've met with in terms of what we are looking for in an application, either through a rezoning or a temporary use permit in some cases. And two of them that I can think of are cases where the business was started as a home occupation. The owner no longer lives there, and now the operator is not the resident, and it no longer complies with the home occupation regulations.
The applications for licenses for short-term rental operations, do you know offhand how many of the number of licenses issued are for short-term rentals?
None of them would be for short-term rentals. Some are for bed and breakfasts.
Okay.
Right. And I don't.
Short-term rentals are.
Yeah.
You don't know
Yeah.
offhand?
Yeah.
So none of the short-term rentals are full of license?
Oh. Well, that I don't know. The Union Steamship, I think, is one of the ones that is still incomplete, and more that's looking for information on the buildings and what occupancies are going on in which buildings.
Well, I think we understood this was going to take a while to sort of work its way through. I'm curious about workload. How onerous is this?
Yeah. So I think, we budgeted a 0.5 FTE for the business license inspector, and I would say especially early on, it's taken more. And then the hope is that following this year, that we'd have a better sense of what it's going to be going forward. Because the hope is then we're able to license the vast majority of business license or businesses on Bowen. And more sort of the unexpected stuff has been more the fire inspections and the occupancy checking, that like sort of the building inspector, building permit side of it. Has been more. I mean, the fire inspection, to some sense, that like it's been nice in that the fire department already has been in through conducting annual inspections of businesses, and this has sort of been a way to formalize it. So it hasn't necessarily been adding a new piece to their workload, but it has made it more formal. And then what we're looking at in terms of renewals is that we would renew commercial businesses starting in 2020, and that the fire department would schedule an inspection at some point during 2020. So knowing they've been inspected in 2019 for the initial one, they'll then get renewed, and we'll say the renewal's pending it, or something. They'll get renewed, and they'll get a fire inspection at some point. They'll have to address it then to get renewed in 2021. And that'll help the fire department to more have a general schedule. And I know the new fire chief is looking at making one day a week, that's the day he does inspection. No inspection on that day.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And then just two final comments. The recommendation or suggestion to defer stage 2 to a later year, I think is really wise, given the work that's being done in other areas, the short-term vacation rental stuff. And I personally would like to see an enforcement strategy that would kick in at the same time as renewals for 2020. I think that would be kind of a logical time to start telling people you've had a year.
Yeah.
You need to get your license.
Yeah.
Great. Rob?
Yeah, just some clarity around the short-term rental, long-term rental. So if I own a house, 3,000 square feet, and rent it out, let's say 1,000 square feet, I'd have to get a business license on an ongoing permanent rental. You need to get a business.
No, so right now, you don't need a business license to rent out a secondary suite or to rent out the house. Like if you rent the house as a long-term rental, you don't need a business license. It's specifically exempt in the business license bylaw. You would need a business license if you were renting a bed and breakfast. So right now, in your 3,000 square foot house, you could have up to 4 or 5 guest bedrooms, depending on the size of the property, that you could run as a bed and breakfast. So you would live in the house, and you would have bedrooms that people would come and stay in, and you would need a business license for that. If you were renting the entire house as a short-term vacation rental, short-term rental, that's currently not permitted in the land use bylaw. So you would apply for a business license, and you would say, actually, no, that's not in compliance with the current zoning.
Right.
Having said that, it's part of the ongoing short-term rental review that we're doing, is sort of looking at that piece. Yeah.
Thanks.
Daniel, how many of those licenses, those 293 are from away from the mainland for people coming over?
I don't know offhand.
Yeah, but we'll just say any guess.
Maybe it's 47 or that.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to guess. I do have the number somewhere, but I don't have it off the top. I do know as part of what the business licensed inspector has been doing is traveling with the building inspector to job sites. And it's look at, as a one key point of contact is at the building desk. So for contractors coming in, it's sort of a reminder that no, you need a business license to operate on Bowen. Yeah.
Have we got anything up on the ferry or anything like that? You know, if they're coming to work on it.
We probably should.
Yeah.
Nice big bright one, about 4 or 6 feet.
Is there anything in the building center?
Yeah, that's also. Any further discussion? Allison?
The kennel one, I have no problem at all, but it says kennels are currently permitted in all rural residential. Any building or structure used for which monetary gain are or are intended to be trained, cared for, bred, boarded, or kept. I'm just wondering if some of the ones, if they're the animal rescue group, is there monetary gain involved in that one?
So I think we would look at a kennel definition potentially even in the business license bylaw that they can be different than the land use bylaw.
Yeah,
So it could just be if you're keeping.
Argue that we're doing,
Yeah.
you know, it's an animal welfare
Yeah.
project, it's not for monetary gain then.
And probably society.
Well, it doesn't
That
matter,
matters,
society is
but
not
still-
profit, and you're not carrying on, you know.
Yeah, so that's something that I would hope and I would be looking at and crafting, and yeah, it's about impact on neighbors.
Okay.
Yeah.
You thought about that.
All right, any further discussion? I'll read the first one, that council directs staff to bring forward amendments to the business license bylaw number 485, 2018 to include business license regulations for kennels. Thank you, Maureen. Further discussion, all in favor? Thank you, that's unanimous. Okay. Whereas phase 2 of the business license program would require properties with attached or detached secondary suites to obtain a business license, and whereas staff feel further consideration is needed to ensure this requirement does not reduce the overall number of available secondary suites, therefore it be resolved that council directs staff to not require a business license for attached or detached secondary suites in 2020, and that council refer the business license update report to the Community Economic Development Committee and the Housing Advisory Committee for comment on the implementation of phase 2 of the business license program and to report back to council.
Second.
Thank you, Allison. Further discussion? No? All in favor? Thank you. Okay, that is done. All right. Thank you, Daniel. All right, correspondence. None. Reports of committees, county commissions. Okay, so the minutes of the Environment and Climate Action Advisory Committee meeting held July 3rd, 2019. Now, there is a recommendation there. Who's presenting this?
Yeah, I'll come back.
Hi, ladies.
Yeah.
What?
So,
Because we received substantial income from the large oil.
Oh, is this one with the,
yes.
Yeah.
have you got the names of the people for
Oh,
whom
you
it's
were
been
in the 20
addressed?
list of 20, I didn't see
I
that.
have a list of 20.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's in.
Shell is number 2
Yeah.
by revenue.
You shall.
Oil here.
Okay.
Still have form, we'll carry on.
Okay. So this came out of a meeting of the Environment Climate Action Advisory Committee, actually quite a while ago, and it's come before us a few times, but we didn't have the letters. And so these are more letters that I've written on other people's behalf. And it came from some work done by West Coast Environmental Law. So there are 2 letters. One is to the top 20 oil companies in the world, saying help pay for basically some of the damage that's caused by climate change. And the other is a letter to the Premier asking for a climate liability act so that there's a way for people to assign responsibility for some of the damage that's caused and so on. Now, obviously, the letter sent to the 20 oil companies, it's the number 1 is a Chinese national oil company, number 3 Saudi national, and so on. I mean, they're obviously not going to send notes back to Bowen Island saying, oh, of course, we'll do this right away. The purpose is to get the conversation going about the cost of climate change and who pays for it. Because as it is now, the costs are going to be enormous and they're entirely borne by the taxpayer. And so this is raising that question, is that fair? Should there be some other way of figuring out who should pay for these costs. And the costs are going to be into the billions of dollars regionally. For us, for us, they're going to be into the millions. For us, they are already. And I've been asked for the list of the top 20 oil companies. I did it by revenue. You can do it all kinds of other ways. I've got it here. I don't have the addresses, but I could provide that if needed. So you can read the two letters, and I'm happy to take any other questions. Oh, I should just add, there's, I believe, 55 other municipalities have signed on. I know Victoria, West Vancouver, Burnaby has sent letters, Fort Moody, other folks have done this. So we're not alone.
Yeah, there's absolutely no question it's a proper thing to do. You know, I don't know how much traction it'll get, but
I'll move that.
Okay. Maureen? Seconded?
Oh, awesome.
Seconded?
Yes.
Further discussion? All in favor? Thank you.
Oh, excellent, thanks.
Passes, thank you.
We'll grab
The liabilities.
There were no cookies out there.
You want the cookies?
Last time
Tell you
there was
something.
cookies.
I said we were on a diet.
I should have gone and broken it in the garage.
Not that it's a collector's office.
Yeah, it's just not that.
Okay, so we're moving on to new business. Metro Vancouver Director David Hawking.
Yeah, I've got a report. There's something, there hasn't been a meeting since I last reported, but there's something coming up on Wednesday,
Okay.
the Housing Committee. There was a little piece in the paper about it. So where this came from is in the board strategic planning session back a couple of months ago that I reported on. One of the things that came up is that Metro Vancouver Housing provides good affordable housing, and that the model they have is sort of 70% kind of low to moderate income and 30% subsidized. But they can't meet the need because basically they pay for the renovation of their existing properties through the rents that they receive, so they don't get any big infusion of money. So a couple of years ago, there was a tax requisition of $1 million, so there's now a new proposal for a tax requisition of $4 million, which would amount to about $4 a household, an average household. And the money would be going to a fund so that they would be able to work with municipalities and build housing, Metro Vancouver housing, on municipal surplus lands that municipalities have that are available. So I thought this was really interesting. It's not happened yet. It will go to the Housing Committee on Wednesday, and then it will go to the board at the end of the month. But since the board recommended that this happen, and since this came out of a workshop the Housing Committee did, it's doubtful that it'll get ditched by the first of May. Anyway, I'm not quite sure of the process since it hasn't happened yet, but I think this would be an interesting report to go to the Mayor's Committee and to also the Housing Committee. And so maybe we should wait until we actually have it, but at that time I'd like to forward it immediately to those two.
Absolutely. What do you think the time frame is on that?
Well, the meeting's on Wednesday, and then it'll go to the board meeting. I've got a board meeting on, I could look into my calendar, but it's later this month.
Before the end of the year, though, right?
Oh, yeah, very quickly, but before the end of this month.
Wow.
So it gets in the next year's budget.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. Well, that's very exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Now, it's still, at $4 million, it's still small in terms of the kind of, I think I've got some numbers. Over the next 10 years, they anticipate building 500 new units, which would house 1,000 to 1,500 people, something like that. So it's not enormous, but obviously anything would help.
Every little bit helps. Yeah, it's great. Thank you. Yeah, let us know as soon as it starts getting a little bit more mature. Okay, so I guess it'll be Trustee Kale.
Will, won't it?
Update.
Yeah. Well, as the music goes, the Islands Trust is coming to town, starting on Monday. On Monday the 16th, we have the Islands 2050 open house, starting at 6:15 at the Library Annex. So that will be the kickoff for the Islands Trust communication, big communication piece, their 2050, their vision of the Islands 2050. It's a very significant exercise, as it was explained to us here. The cost of this exercise in the trust district is $60,000, and that doesn't include 1 cent for any staff time. So we've got a major exercise taking place there, available from 6:15, Library Annex, on Monday the 16th. The meetings take place on the 17th and the 18th, and I believe we have a dinner dinner invitation for Tuesday the 17th. Yeah. I think it might be quite an interesting council meeting. I've been on the phone with some trustees this morning. I get the feeling, when I first joined Islands Trust, I thought, well, you know, everyone speaks with one voice, with one exception, and that exception was me. I'm not so entirely convinced that's the case any longer, and I think there are going to be some very pertinent questions being asked. One of the most interesting one to me is that on the Friday there will actually be, and it's on the agenda, a call for an independent review.
On the Tuesday.
On the Wednesday at 9 o'clock. New business. There's a call for an independent review of the trust. And there are several trustees who want to have the trust reviewed. The trust did a commission in 2007 with using the management company Santec, a very large report, a comprehensive report. The report was received. Unkindly, it was shelved. Kindly, it wasn't actioned. And another internal report was commissioned directly afterwards, resulting, by the way, in a great swelling of the employment of numbers of the Islands Trust. So for a lot of it, I am really buoyed by the fact that there are some independent voices I'm hearing out there, and the fact that a call for an independent inquiry on the trust is on the agenda is hugely significant. And I value the people that have it. The reports, the Saturna trustees sent me their somewhat scathing report. They have written on the 2050, basically, and I can send anyone who's interested a copy of their new, quite lengthy newspaper article, which I'm told this morning has had a lot of traction on Saturna, really saying, you know, really not speaking in favour of this 2050 exercise and the cost involved and the results that are anticipated. And if anybody is interested, please nudge me. I won't be, you've all got enough paperwork. I will be happy to send it to you. Just privately, just ask me. No, I will forward it. So I am pleased. I hope what will come out of this is a somewhat shortened edition. We don't have it. It sometimes goes over the 2 days and comes 2.5, with half the people leaving on the morning, the third morning, myself included on the last one. And so it is always a compacted, heavily scripted agenda. Hopefully this time we might get some real dialogue. And I do encourage people to please come along to the open house, the Vision 2050, on the Monday at the Library Annex. If nothing else, it will give you a chance to meet the chair, Peter Luckham, who tells me he's going to be there. And when I asked him, you are going to be there, he said, why? Why do you want to know? I just said, there's just so many people who are looking forward to meeting you. So
he's always there.
Yes. He is a good guy, actually. And it is his job. He has the invidious task of controlling a meeting of 26 people. Now, we are 6, but normally 7 around this table, aided by 2 people from our municipality. He has the job of corralling 26 people at a meeting. Now, I know, David, at Metro, you attend some of these large meetings, but it is a formidable task. You know, whatever I might think about some of the things said and some of the processes, I do commend and congratulate him for trying to keep that in good order. So it's show and tell and come and see, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday next week.
Mhm.
The Islands Trust is coming to town.
Are we gonna get, I guess we'll get the schedule on that.
It's on your website.
Now, it's
It's
on
on
the,
I sent calendar with.
now, do you have the sort of minute by minute, blow by blow one? I will send it to you, and then I will send it to you, Hope, and then you can
That'd be
send
great,
it.
thanks.
I have it.
Yeah, well, there's a link, if you go on the Islands Trust website and go into calendar and hit on trust.
But this actually gives you what's happening on Tuesday and Wednesday from the first minute to the last
Yeah,
minute.
the whole business agenda.
Yeah, and I will forward it to you, and I hope you enjoy reading it.
And interestingly enough,
Thank
I
you.
was on the ferry this afternoon coming back, and there was Claire Frater. They're actually doing a 2050 show and tell, you might have seen them up on the ferry this afternoon.
Oh, on the
and they're-
ferry?
And they're
Yes.
doing it
Oh,
tomorrow morning.
interesting.
Yeah.
Oh,
And then they're going to Gambier tomorrow night, and then be back here next week.
Oh, how nice. There we
All
go.
right, well, thank you, Michael.
My pleasure.
Councillor Nicholson, update to Council on Metro Vancouver Regional Parks.
We have not met in the last month or so. Our next meeting will be on the 18th of September, and I imagine it will be lively.
Why, what's the topic?
Yeah, what's going on?
Yeah, what's happening? Do tell. That's a teaser. It will be lively, but you didn't say why.
I'll share that.
Oh, you think the
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Allison, do you want to say something about the,
We have,
Transit Mayor's
it
Council?
hasn't met yet either, not till next week.
awesome. Well, then we'll move on to items removed from the consent agenda. 3.7 was yours, Maureen.
Sorry, I forgot. So this is the water treatment plant alternative approval process. And I just want to confirm that I understand this. So that there was some earlier discussion around, we are all Cove Bay water users on the island. However, the way this is structured, it will only be the Cove Bay households that will be voting as part of the alternative approval process. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct, okay. That's all.
Residents, property owners and residents.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that. And I have no other questions, thank you.
Okay. Just on that note, if I might just jump in. In the report, in the timeline, we were expected to receive approval from the inspector of municipalities on September 6th. Staff sort of informally confirmed that. We've yet to receive the approval, but I suspect we will. So should anything change, we'll inform council, but as of this time, I'm confident with the timeline that's included in the report.
So we don't need his approval before we can
We do,
do the next.
but I expect to get it this
resolution.
week. No, we can go ahead with these resolutions at any time.
And we were assured we would have it. It was put before the minister. We just haven't gotten official confirmation yet. We should be getting that tomorrow.
Tomorrow. I left a voicemail with their office today.
Okay, so Maureen, you have to read the recommendation.
I do, whereas council has given 3 readings to Bowen Island Municipality Loan Authorization Bylaw number 488/2019, which proposes to borrow a sum not to exceed $2,533,000 required to complete the Cove Bay Water Treatment Plant project. And whereas council cannot adopt bylaw number 488/2019 until the approval of the electors is obtained. And whereas the community charter requires council to establish the deadline for receiving elector responses, establish elector response forms, and make a fair determination of the total number of eligible electors prior to proceeding with the alternative approval process, therefore be it resolved. 1. That council establish the total number of eligible electors for the area defined for the Cove Bay Water Treatment Plant alternative approval process as being 1,190, as outlined in the report from the corporate officer dated August 22nd, 2019. 2, that council approve the elector response form as outlined in the report from the corporate officer dated August the 27th, 2019. And 3, that council establish the deadline for receiving elector response forms as Monday, October 21st, 2019 at 4:30 p.m.
So moved.
Second that. And further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. That was done. Allison, you're up next.
I pulled 310 because, not because I don't think that should be looked at, the issue of the hearing, but there's not a lot of science in here to say whether the 20% catch is or not having an impact. And hearing is coming back very much here in the sound. And also this, the very first sentence, we request that you place, that's almost like we're telling the minister what to do. And so I think I would prefer the wording that I would like us to suggest that the first sentence read, we are writing to request that you consider placing a moratorium on herring fishery. Because you're writing to the minister who has the power, but we can't tell him what to do. And I thought to consider placing was a better.
Sorry, in support of placing a moratorium?
We are ready to request that you consider placing a moratorium, is what I would like to have first.
Sorry, are you changing the recommendation?
Yeah.
No, I'm changing, I don't like the way they wrote the first sentence of the letter.
So you're saying if we were to write it, we would revise it along those
Yeah,
lines?
that I'm saying, I think we should recommend, because it says draft for review and comment. Recommend that they change the first sentence of the letter.
I see, Allison. So you're saying we still can co-sign it if they change that?
Yeah, I'm not unhappy with.
I appreciate what you're saying, but you didn't read the last half of the sentence. And, until an ecosystem-based management plan is in place, it considers blah, 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 blah. So it's not saying.
It is, it's saying that they have to have an ecosystem-based management place that considers, but there's no science here saying they need it or they don't need it.
They're suggesting the science isn't there, and we should be cautious, is what they're suggesting.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, there's no science.
We were watching the humpback jump out front yesterday, and we had 3 or 4 killer whales going by on a regular basis 2 or 3 times a week. So there's,
So if we suggest this, but they say, no, we're gonna keep it as it is, then we're not signing on to it, or?
I would sign on to it.
I would just say, I don't mind suggesting it, but I don't know if it's a deal breaker. Signing it on.
Who eats herring anyway? Who eats herring anyway?
It's like.
My family does.
Okay, do we get some kind of resolution here?
May I just ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
It's just in the letter from Peter, the first page.
Okay.
I don't understand.
His letter to us?
Yes. The beginning of the third paragraph, what does that mean? In addition, this forage fish forms one of the foundational species for language.
And culture and spiritual understanding of the Coast Salish people.
Shouldn't be a comment.
Is it just a punctuation?
Yeah, it's a punctuation, shouldn't be a comment.
Okay. All
It
right.
should be language, cultural, and spiritual, or something like that.
Yeah.
It's the end.
Just stopped me.
So is there a recommendation there, Allison, that you'd like to?
Well, I would say that council received a letter from Peter Luckham, Chair of the Honest Trust Council, dated August 1, 2019, and that council write back to Peter Luckham suggesting that the first sentence of the letter to the minister read, we are ready to request that you consider placing a moratorium. And the council authorized the mayor to co-sign a letter to the Honorable Jonathan Wilkinson, Minister of Fisheries, Oceans and Canadian Coast Guard on behalf of council in support of the request for consideration of a moratorium.
That sweetens it up a bit, but I think the intent is exactly the same.
I guess my only comment is that they're sending this out to whatever, 20 to 15 different councils, so now do they have to rewrite it and resend it out to everybody?
They have sent out to 15 different councils.
What's that?
What councils did they send it to?
Everyone that's CC'd on the letter.
The additional signatures. is
No, not, Peter Luckham's letter, it's just us. The additional, the CC in the letter is all First Nations and the MPs and everybody they're gonna copy the letter to. The actual co-signing is just us. It's just CC on the Trust Council and I.
It says additional signature.
It says additional
here.
signatories.
Where?
Well, down the bottom,
Beside
Peter
Capital
Luckham's.
letter right beside his name, to the right of his name.
My understanding is that they are getting other local governments to, or other municipalities, or other
Okay, then I'll just vote against the resolution.
trust areas.
I just don't think it's right to.
It's not very great, it could be more adeptly written. I mean,
Yeah.
I think
I
I've
just
also
don't
got
think you tell the
a
minister
good,
that.
good point, it's a matter of writing
Yeah,
style.
I don't disagree.
I don't think it greatly changes the intent.
Yeah.
No, I think the intent is the same, it's just the.
Yeah.
It's another letter that someone's got to do.
Okay, okay, so the recommendation is the council received a letter from Peter Luckham, Chair Island Trust Council, dated August 1st, 2019, and the council authorized the mayor to co-sign the letter to the Honorable Jonathan Wilkinson, Minister of Fisheries, Oceans, and the Canadian Coast Guard on behalf of council in support of a request for a moratorium on the herring fishery in the Salish Sea.
I'll second.
Thank you, David.
I'm going to amend it.
Okay, yeah.
Insert after the first clause,
Mm-hmm.
and that council write to Peter Luckham recommending that the first paragraph of the letter be amended to read, "We are ready to request that you consider placing a moratorium." And that we insert after request for, delete request for consideration of. So insert the words consideration of after request for.
I'll second that.
Mm.
Okay. And further discussion on the amendment?
This is voting on.
The amendment. All in favor of the amendment?
Oh, sorry, Councilor
Opposed?
Yeah.
Okay.
We
Michael?
have it at,
No, I like the change.
okay, so
Oh, yeah,
that's
okay.
3, 4, and 3
Yeah, so.
What's that? What are the
It's the only thing we've disagreed on the whole evening, and it has to rank right in the levels of trivia for the evening.
So good.
Yeah.
it's defeated then, you missed it.
Okay, amendment's defeated. Okay, so on the previous recommendation, do we have a second on that?
Yeah,
I
second.
think it's David, and any further discussion? All in favor?
Okay.
Okay, we have 4 and opposed. Thank you, it is passed. And on that happy note, except for,
Rob, were you in opposition?
No.
Just the two. Sorry.
question period. Yeah?
I'm in here,
Ready?
so
Yeah, okay.
That's just one of our
On
questions.
that happy note, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody. Well done, good timing. Very decisive night.
Very Allison, but it's great that it died because there's 20 other people that
It's
have
gonna
it.
die because there's 600 other signatures.
It was just too agreeable all night long, you had to
Yeah.
throw a wrench in it.
Just to show your somebody was listening. Thanks, Raj. It's called Holnish.
Oh,
No, that's not.
it's,
No, it's called.
yeah, I forget, I have to just listen to it. That's
Where's Bob's video? It says it enough
It
times.
says it enough times in the video. A cat song, something like that.
That's it. Well, that, somewhere like that.
Something like that.
I don't profess to be perfect in that language. Michael sort of got a little sidetracked. Well, I was going to give you a little chat this afternoon, but I
It's okay.
Good.
We'll catch up, I expect, during the course on most things on the course of this afternoon.
This silly thing is showing dotted red lines under water law. Is that because it doesn't like the spelling? It should be 2 words.
Is it special or closed first?
Special tourist thing.
In the mortgage, because we're
Okay.
Building.
You'll get it.
I'll let you coordinate. Probably should hide the plastic box.
I don't have a building bylaw.
Presentation, I emailed it, just this
Okay.
last email, I think, I'm pretty sure.
Word doesn't show on track changes and stuff when you open it up and not get it.
Good morning.
No, Suella?
You know what's going on? I guess they just get some stomach flu or something.
Where is
Is that for a time thing?
Yeah, she
Much of a
she
holiday
wasn't,
for her.
she wasn't well for,
No. All right, well, we'll call this meeting to order. Welcome back, everybody. Hope everybody enjoyed their month off.
didn't get a month off.
All right, glad to see you all back. So we have a special council meeting Monday, September the 9th. And the approval of the agenda, any late items?
We do have one late item for this meeting, which was the track change version of the building bylaw 489 provided by Daniel by email.
Okay. Hi. Look at that, hop on. Good to see you. Good. Okay, thank you. And can we have approval of the agenda then, please? Thank you, Rob and, yeah. Public comments? You got anything to say? All right, thank you. And the bylaws, we're going to move to a committee of the whole, and the recommendations, council move to the committee of the whole, I'll move that. Somebody seconded it, David, thank you. And right on to 3.2, which is Daniel Martin, Manager of Planning and Development, re-proposed building bylaw number 498, 2019. We got 167 pages.
Attachment and
167 pages to go through.
No problem.
Yes.
no.
So thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council. So I'll give you a brief background of the project, and then I wanted to run through just what some of the more significant changes in the proposed building bylaw were, just to sort of guide some discussion. So by way of background, so February of this year, Council directed staff to prepare an amendment to our current building bylaw, which is bylaw number 65. To reflect adoption of the step code. So step code 1 by October 1st of this year and step 3 by October 1st of 2020. And at that same time to draft upgrades to the green building policy to reflect the step code. So way of background, our current building bylaw was adopted in 2002. And it was based on a model bylaw put out by the MIABC, which is the Municipal Insurance Association of British Columbia. So more background, so in between then, the Provincial Building Act was adopted in 2015, and this established the province as the sole authority to set building requirements, so it's technical requirements. Local governments can still set administrative requirements, but so it used to be that the local governments had the authority in their building bylaws to regulate things like, before the step code, environmental issues, you could regulate noise requirements or any sort of requirements within your building bylaw, and local governments no longer have that authority. Also to note, the building code is periodically updated by the province, and the latest update came into effect December of 2018. And the MIABC has periodically released new model building bylaws, so they released this, a later version in the spring of 2018. I'll note on that too, they released them for smaller communities and for cities, and we've always used the smaller community model. So in preparing an amendment bylaw to the building bylaw to include step code requirements, staff, so mainly myself and Greg Cormier, our building inspector, looked at to address some ongoing issues with the current building bylaw and challenges that we've had in enforcing and implementing the building bylaw. So ultimately, as we tried to go through that process of saying, okay, what would we change? We determined instead we're probably better starting with an entirely new building bylaw, and so basing it on the updated model building bylaw rather than trying to craft, somehow merging them together just to start over. So I've characterized some of the changes into clarity and then new requirements and expanded requirements. So in terms of clarity, there's a number of places where our current bylaw 65 will mention a topic and not have any sort of regulations around it and leave it just very open. So for example, in our current bylaw, we take a deposit with a building permit of 1% of the construction language, but there's actually no other reference in the bylaw itself as to what the deposit is for. So we've encountered this before in terms of, can we use the deposit to do certain things? Well, we have no authority to use the deposit. We sort of can use it as a carrot to incentivize people to finish, but in terms of doing corrective work, there's no authority there. So the new bylaw has language that what the deposit is for and when it's returned and when we can use it and when we withhold it and return it. Similarly, so temporary buildings, they're listed as an item in our current building bylaw as something you tick to say you're applying for a temporary permit, but there's no actual language in the bylaw about, well, what is a temporary building? How long is temporary? What standards does a temporary building have to apply for? So the new bylaw has a section on that. And again, moving a building, so if you bring a building from another jurisdiction into Bowen Island, so you've bought an old house in the Lower Mainland and you're barging it over to Bowen, well, what standards does it have to do? Again, our current bylaw has an item on the building permit. You tick and say, yes, I'm moving a building, but there's nothing else in it that says, okay, well, what's acceptable and what are we taking in? So the new bylaw has a section that talks about, okay, what you have to do to move a building. In essence, it's that a registered professional certifies it substantially complies with the current version of the building code. So again, in our current bylaw, it states that if you want to demolish a building, you need a permit for it. There's again, it's included in the application form, and there's a fee listed for it, but it doesn't say, okay, well, what do you actually have to do to get a demolition permit? In the current bylaw, again, it says now, okay, you need to do these couple things that you ensure it's safe and it's done properly, but it's outlined in the bylaw itself. And probably in terms of clarity as well. So if you're changing the occupants, changing the use of a building. So if you built a garage and you want to change it into a secondary suite, or you built a workshop and now you want to do it as an Airbnb, it's a change of use that requires a building permit. And our current bylaw has that requirement, but it's sort of hidden in the middle of another paragraph, and this bylaw separates it out. So it's really clear to say, okay, if you're changing the use of a building, that requires a building permit as well as building the building. So in terms of new requirements, well, most obviously our current bylaw has no step code requirements. The new bylaw would have step code requirements, so we just mandate step 1 now and step 3 in October of 2020. And other new requirements, so our current bylaw has no requirements for sanitary facilities, and so the new bylaw has a section where it says sanitary facilities are required on site where a building permit has been issued. And then we actually crafted language around it that says, or it can be in a vicinity of work. So we talked to some contractor and they said, well, sometimes it's the neighboring property can provide it. We said, okay, that's an acceptable alternative. And then probably more where people would experience differences in our bylaw is more about where we talk about expanded requirements. So when we go through applications, there's an expanded list of what we're requiring on a site plan and requiring a survey of the property. So our current bylaw says that it's required to be a site plan prepared by a BC land surveyor, and the new bylaw would say, well, it's by a registered professional, but you also need to provide a survey of the property to show the whole property. And then expanded requirements again, so in inspections, there's additional inspection points. So it says there's an inspection point following excavation before you start constructing the forms, which is a new inspection point. And there's a new inspection point of vapor barriers and insulation, which we've actually been inspecting. It was a sort of, as the code has changed, it's now required, but our bylaw hasn't changed to reflect that point. And letters of assurance, so there's changes in the language around letters of assurance. Letters of assurance are if you have a registered professional doing work and overseeing a component of your building, such as the foundation, the engineer provides the letter of assurance to say, I'm doing this and I'll certify it and take care of it. And so what we've had challenges with it in our current bylaw is implementing timing of it. So people say, well, I'm going to provide letters of assurance, but so you don't need to worry about it. And so this will say, okay, well, before you do that, you need to provide us the letter of assurance, and then we won't worry about it once you've provided the name of that engineer who's doing it. So those were the main points that I had flagged, and then thanks to feedback from Allison and Maureen, I've sent around that revised version this afternoon with the track changes. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on our green building policy. So that was in that same meeting in February, Council directed changes to the green building policy. So our current green building policy is about seeking green building standards at a time of rezoning. And so it's intended to be a guide for council in determining rezoning applications, but also for applicants knowing what council is looking for at time of application, and for staff in terms of directing rezonings. And I note in the report that our adherence to the policy has not been totally consistent, but there are projects out there that have covenants on title as a result of this policy. So I mentioned the Evergreen development has policies in place, or Snow Cove House has policies in place that are requiring green building standards. And our current policy references Built Green Gold and Inner Guide 80 as two standards that we seek as part of a rezoning. So the proposed policy would say instead to seek step 3, which is what, when the step code was released, it showed like a cross-reference and said these are equivalents, and it's saying step 3 is equivalent to a Built Green Gold or Inner Guide 80. And so seeking that compliance for 2019, but then you need to update it again or reconsider again when we require step 3 on all buildings. It would be logical then to say, okay, we require step 4 for rezonings. Yeah, but so as part of that, I recommend referring the policy to the Environmental Climate Action Advisory Committee for more discussion about what a green building policy looks like under step code, and under, especially sort of requiring in this interim stage in 2019, and then we require it for all buildings at step 3 in 2020. Well, what should the green building policy say at that point? So I think that was the end of my presentation, and I'm open for any questions on maybe on the building bylaw initially, and then we could follow on to the green building policy and answer some other questions on that one.
So just on that, so you think we're going to go to step 4? We'll consider step 4. Is there a requirement to be to step 5 by 32 or whatever?
Yeah, I know they've got a timeline, and
Yeah.
I think you're right, 2032 or something like that to get to that point. And I know that initially when the step code had been put out, they said, okay, well, we recommend local governments not go beyond step 3 as a requirement, as a baseline requirement, but you can require more as part of rezonings. So some like the North Shore is requiring, okay, step 4 or step 5, I think, is part of a rezoning. Before going, I've been sort of nervous before going to step 4 as like seeing that's an additional thing, and I want maybe some more like information. So I'd say, at this point, for the policy saying, okay, these are equivalents of step 3, so it makes sense, maybe, but then knowing if we're going to require everything to be step 3.
Yeah, I think there's quite a change between step 3 and step 4.
Yeah, that's my sense too.
Yeah, so we can take a look at it then when the time comes. Anybody else?
No, it's the same. My understanding is there's quite a difference between 3 and 4 as well.
Yeah.
So it needs to be looked at, yeah.
Shall I make just one question? We, outside of your office and the Muni here, has anyone else been privy to these changes that might be coming down? Have they been discussed with anyone in the trades here on the island?
Not in any formal way, no. So as Greg and I were working on it, and people would come in, we would poll people on requirements and say, oh, we're talking about sanitary facilities. Is that an outrageous requirement, or is that? So we're sort of poll testing as we would go, but no, we haven't done any open houses. We are holding a workshop and then an open house on, I think, September 17th or 14th. It must be 17th, so next week, as part of the Energy Step Code workshops. And so our intent would be at that same time as well to go over changes to the building bylaw.
So is it advertised as changes to the bylaw?
No.
So we should let people know
Yeah.
you're going to cover both.
Yeah.
So that brings up, I prefer to just do 2 readings tonight, not 3, because then it's, if there is something that comes up at that workshop, then it's very easy to change it, rather than having to go back. And it also, I think it's only fair to let them have an opportunity to.
Yeah, so with that, so council's direction from the February was to adopt the step code by October 1st, but in terms of essentially the time that it would be to get 2 readings tonight and come back for 3rd reading and any changes September 30th, we would then be looking to adopt October 8th. So delay the step code by a week, or a week and a bit, but I see the attraction of that and having a chance for comment to reflect on it more as well.
I think it's just better process.
I think that would be probably a better idea. How does everybody feel about that?
Yes.
Just gives it time to sort of let it, get through the system, as it were.
I think-
Are you planning an actual session with the contractors and that sort of thing, or?
Just like I said, we have a step code session
Okay.
scheduled, and so we would piggyback on that. And then
Perfect.
if the council direction is as well is to space it out more, then we would look at doing another open house specifically on the building bylaw. Yeah, so given, if I know that, okay, I'm coming back September 30th, then I'd probably look, the week of UBCM, maybe of doing an open house then as well, and then I can bring that for council on the 30th as well.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Be nice and quiet around here. Maureen?
Just want to confirm, the part 3 and the part 9 of the step code, is most of the residential construction is part 3? Is that correct?
It's part 9.
It's part 9.
Part 2 is the more complex
Yeah,
building.
part 3 is more complex building.
Okay. So it's mandatory step 5 in 2032
Okay. For part 9 buildings.
for part 9 buildings.
Yes.
And part 3 buildings don't go up to step 5.
Right, because they just have a 4. Yeah.
I had mentioned to Daniel that, it references in here that anytime you do any repair work to your house, you require a building permit. And now, that hasn't changed from the old system, has it been? I mean, that's not a new thing.
Yeah, so the bylaw is the same, and it says, so alteration requires a permit, and alteration, I just try to find my definition here, change, repair, or modification of the construction or arrangement of or use of any building is an alteration. So change, repair, or modification.
So
Now it
if
says to
you're-
the construction of, so,
Yeah.
So if you're taking cedar shakes off and putting new cedar shakes on,
you're probably not a construction, but if you're taking the roof like system apart,
like the trusses and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
then that's construction.
But a repair could also be, like I talked about, could be redoing your roof or fixing a window that's gone or something like that. So, but it's the same as it always was. So I said, that's not a big deal, we'll just carry on as we're doing.
Yeah.
But it was to get clarification so that people understand that if they do any, like even if they're redoing their deck or something like that, they can't go and throw another 10 feet on the side of it.
Yeah.
Sort of thing, That's.
So I can bring, at the 30th, I can talk to the building inspector, and we can get a more definite list, even just for people's awareness in terms of, okay, these are activities that require building permits.
Yeah.
And noting that it's not changing under this bylaw, but this is what requires a building permit.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Yeah. I know some of the logic of requiring permits for like changes to the building envelope, so changing windows, changing roofing is if there's energy requirements in the code now until you build it and say you have to build perfectly to a step code. And then in a year, somebody says, well, I'm going to swap out my windows and replace them with single pane windows, but it kind of has defeated the purpose of the step code requirements and the energy requirements. So yeah, it's a trade-off because people don't like getting permits for stuff they feel it's just, I'm just fixing a little bit inside or something, and where does it trigger that you need a building permit?
Yeah, there's always going to be some irregular circumstances there where, it probably isn't needed, but if somebody at least comes in and asks if it's needed, then you would get clarification. Maureen, did you have some?
Yeah, I'm seeing the track changes version this time. I like the change that you made from the 24 to the 48 hours notice. I think that's much more manageable.
Yeah.
And then on page 19, there's sort of an unfinished reference to potable power.
Yeah.
What's that about?
So that was in discussion with Allison, and then I hadn't made it as a comment, so I didn't catch it before I sent it out as well.
Yeah.
So how will it be revised?
Well, I was raising the issue of, they're talking about wanting copies of approvals required under any enactment relating to health or safety, and then sewage systems and driveway access, but a lot of people are selling a house that has a well, and it was already certified and tests done and proving it's potable, so do they have to redo all those tests? Or if you're attached to a surface water system, do you have to show your license that you're able to draw that and that you've got an approved treatment system from the Vancouver Coastal Health? I was really curious as to why the standard bylaw only talked about sewage systems and didn't talk at all about water systems.
I think if I remember correctly, we had a version of this discussion before, and it was that the water issues were dealt with by Vancouver Coastal Health rather than by the municipality. And I know, in having sold my home recently, there are a number of things that have been taken off the purchase agreement related to water, because the assumption is that Coastal Health will be taking care of it.
But they don't care if it's a single family dwelling.
I don't know, I mean, I'm wondering about the wording here.
Yeah, so I would have, if I'd seen this comment again, I would have removed it.
Yeah. So I think it's.
And that's how I
something we
assume it,
need
yeah.
maybe.
And because higher up in the, on page 17 of the bylaw, so that's under building application requirements, and it says that, okay, if it's not attached to a municipal water system, the owner must apply for and obtain approval from municipality and other applicable public authorities for an alternate potable water supply system. So it's okay, that's covering, that's what's trying to cover that question.
Okay, thank you.
And the other thing I guess I was wondering about was the quantum of the fee. Like is $75 just for processing the application? That doesn't seem to be enough just for a base fee. And then on top of that, it's so much per $1,000 of construction value. And construction value, I think there's a reference in the definitions to construction value. But I was just wondering how that compared to other municipalities. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't have a comparison, and then part of me was thinking, as I was bringing an entirely new building bylaw, I didn't want to bring a new base fee structure at the same time.
No.
So I did adjust the fees for things at the tail end of that appendix, which are like registering items in the land title. But I didn't adjust the base application, the base fees.
And then there's that section that limits the fine to $10,000. Now, when we charge double the building permit amount, is that a fine?
Yeah.
I think it's classified as a fee in the bylaw.
Yeah. So we could charge the fines under the fining schedule could be up to $10,000.
Yeah, so I mean, the bylaw, and what I've done here, is make the stop work order, like when you do work, and you get a stop work order, you pay double to a maximum of $10,000, and that's in part the language that is in the standard.
But they use the word fine in the standard, and in our fees schedule, we've got that other
as a
line
fee.
right at the end that says if you had a stop work order and it's more than 30 days, then the building permit fee is basically double the fee. So is that a fine, or is that just the permit fee?
You're getting
Requiring afterwards.
You're getting fined.
Yeah, so when I did the legal review of the bylaw, our lawyer recommended moving that into the section under fees out of the like in penalty section and into the fee section as an additional fee that you have to pay.
But she left that fine section in there.
So it's out of the violation section and into the.
Yeah, what page?
I'm trying to see where it was, and it's now 10.8. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just thinking we've been trying to end up with something that, you know, when somebody builds something and moves in without ever having applied for a building permit, we wanted to be able to levy something more than just double the building permit.
So the other thing that's on your agenda today that I actually didn't touch in the presentation is amendments to our bylaw notice bylaw, and that was bylaw notice enforcement bylaw. So it's bylaw 491. And that is a bylaw that would place bylaw notice enforcements for infringing on sections of the building bylaw. So that's the one where essentially we give it's not a ticket, but it functions similarly to a ticket. So it can be for a single offense, then for a second offense, and for consequence offenses. And so I've drafted that and pulled a fair number of the sections out that I thought were appropriate, which would get would have that happen. Some of which are based on the model bylaw had like a finding schedule at the end of it under a ticketing scheme, and so we've done it under a bylaw notice scheme, but the basic thing starts the same. And so I've gone through and pulled things out where it's like failure to, so some of that is like construction without a permit, where we could, instead of saying double permit fees, we just say, okay, it's you've started work and you need a permit, and it's some smaller amount that you haven't done, you haven't got your inspection notices, or you've tampered with a stop work notice, you've interfered at building officials' right of entry, you have an unsafe site, you haven't complied with permit conditions, you don't have permits on site, or supporting documents on site, you haven't posted your civic address, you haven't posted your permit. Items like that where, it's unlikely that we would ever actually go to court to seek enforcement of a provision in the building bylaw, but it gives some other measure that we could potentially be doing in terms of, we may not go to court to do this, but we could write you a notice and have a monetary penalty that goes with it.
So going back
Yeah.
to the $10,000 maximum,
Yeah.
which I can't find the section, can we charge a $10,000 fine plus double? Like if the building permit itself was 12 grand,
Yeah.
can we charge 24,000 for the new building permit plus a $10,000 fine? Or are we limited to 12,000 for the new
Right.
building permit plus 10?
I mean, to get a $10,000 fine is a court order, and I would imagine. Yeah, it's like so for us to, like, the bylaw enforcement notice can only be a $500 notice. So for us to get a $10,000 fine, it would be going to court. And I would imagine if we've given them a double penalty for a stop, like a double building permit, the court's gonna say, really, how much more are you gonna want?
I guess we didn't think that double the building permit was necessarily an adequate.
No,
Yeah.
maybe not.
The fire one, Daniel, part 15.
Yes, thank you. That was the other piece I hadn't included in my presentation.
There's a sub-E.
Yeah.
15.1E. You've got to delete towns and put in municipalities.
Thank you, yeah.
So can we just change that? And then you've got an F there with nothing
Yeah.
beside it, so I don't know. I think that's
I
probably
think it's just a space that got added,
That's just
yeah.
probably the computer doing its own thing.
Is that it, Allison?
It's trouble. I'm trying to get into the fees.
Just while you're doing that, Adam, this, as you can see, this is kind of a special meeting. We're dealing with the building codes. I know it's not really super exciting. The actual main council meeting tonight will be at 6:15. Yeah? Okay, good. Thank you.
Some people like watching.
I know. Just love your questions.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was just, were the fees comparable? So we can still look at the fee schedule and it's easy to change a
Yeah.
schedule. But,
Gotta start somewhere, I guess.
It's more formatting and stuff, and I think that can probably be changed without having to change it again. Okay. So do we need a motion to give a first and second reading as amended? Well, we need to move out of
You wanna read that, Allison?
committee. Oh, we gotta move out of committee of the whole first.
So we are going to move then. If anybody has any more questions for Daniel? No, thank you. We're going to reconvene the special council meeting. And then planning development building update report dated August 30, 2019. Are you going to get into that again, or is it already done?
Do you want, well, the
Sorry.
motions that we've got to talk about
Yeah.
the green building standards, we forgot to do that.
Could I just get some clarity around the draft recommendation? So we've got first and, it sounds like first and second
Yeah,
reading
right,
now for 489
As amended.
as amended.
Yeah.
And bylaw 491 1,
Yeah.
the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw. Have we adequately discussed that?
And so I realized that one, yeah, on the agenda, it's like, it's linked, it's within the report itself as at the tail end of the report itself, so it's harder to find on the system.
I guess my only question was, what is everybody else charged to? Because I have no idea what it is.
For the fees itself.
Reasonable numbers,
Yeah.
like $250 if you construct, alter, excavate, reconstruct, remove without a building permit.
It says page 69 in the report. And I agree with Councillor Morse, it's hard to assess this without having something as a comparable. So I'd be prepared to support a first and second reading.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Absolutely.
Or should it just be a first reading?
I was going to say, but I mean, I
Do
asked,
second and third.
my question was who externally has seen this, and I think the spirit of this is that we're not taking it to, I think your point on reading through is excellent. Let's get some input, and then, you know, changes need to be made. This is relatively straightforward, and we can move ahead. It also gives us a chance to discuss the changes when other people have had a chance to see it too. I mean, what do other people have to say on it? And this is a good discussion point.
We may get feedback that these are
Yeah.
way higher than,
Yeah.
where did they come from?
The, sorry, the bylaw 491, like all the
Yeah,
infraction
yeah.
stuff.
Not the infractions, but the numbers.
Me and Greg primarily. Yeah, so there were numbers in the standard bylaw,
Oh, okay.
and then it was sort of tweaking them, so some
I didn't
up and
realize
some
this.
down.
Yeah, right, I forgot about that schedule in the standard file.
Yeah, which doesn't, like, I've changed it because the way our formatting works is we end up with like for a first offense and second offense and penalty and early payment. And
Yeah.
so it's not very clean to read.
Thanks for reporting. So do you want to?
Is that an average? Do you sort of take an average, or what do you use for examples?
Well, the standard bylaw had numbers in it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They had it as an attachment, so that's part of the standard bylaw, not part of the bylaw enforcement bylaw.
And then some of them I probably tweaked in terms of getting, like, the further offenses getting up to a $500, the maximum it can be.
Yeah.
And I tried to push them up, so by the third offense, we are giving the $500 in terms of, we're giving somebody 3 notices for whatever they may be, tamper with a stop work notice or something. It's like by the third time, people should know they should do it.
You would think.
Yeah.
So you don't need the green building standards to be adopted or read at this meeting?
No, because one, it can be done adoption, so I would think the earliest we would do it is the same time when we actually adopt the building bylaw. But I would say too, it can lag because it's going to be that guide for council, so we can tell, if applicants come and we tell them, well, council's considering these changes, so you know, we're going to be asking for you as you come forward, this is what we're looking for, that's okay too.
So do you want the referral tonight, or?
I'd like the referral tonight, I think they don't meet until the October 2nd, so then that's when I'd be going from anyways. But.
The referral is to address the step 3 compliance that should come down. So pretty much everything that's in the green building policy at the moment has to do with energy efficiency. And what I'm wondering about is whether, with referral to the environment and climate action, there's an opportunity to look at things like rainwater catchment and cisterns.
Yeah.
Would that be within scope?
I would certainly think so, yeah.
I mean, it's like to some extent, it's like creep in terms of like currently all our green building standard says is energy stuff, but under their mandate of environment and climate action, it makes sense, as like a, this is initial, or to say like, okay, what fits within this policy versus what should we require, or like that conversation, but yeah.
Yeah, because we are getting public feedback that, why the heck aren't we requiring new buildings, cisterns and rain
cisterns,
Can we require under the building, I mean,
So when this first came up and I asked the Islands Trust like what are their requirements, so they have some development permit areas, and it's a really clear development permit area. You can have a development permit area for water conservation.
no,
That's
but
you-
my
Right,
question
and then, so sorry, and then the land, Galliano's land use bylaw requires cisterns as a zoning requirement.
yeah, so I mean, remember
Yeah.
in some rezonings, like,
everything.
Evergreen, we required
Yeah.
cisterns as part of that rezoning
Yeah.
and pervious surfaces for driveways.
Yeah.
So, but that was as a rezoning, but added, if you've already got your lot, there's no
Yeah.
rezoning, you're
Yeah.
just going to apply for a building permit. We can't require cisterns and we can't require pervious surfaces.
Like I said, so Galliano does it in their land use bylaw as a zoning thing to say if you're gonna build a dwelling in this zone, you need a cistern of a certain size. I'm like, I would want a lengthy legal opinion before saying we can do that in a zoning bylaw, but we can clearly do it as a development permit area.
So if
And-
the island were to be a DPA for water conservation, given some of the things going
Yeah.
on?
Yeah.
Okay.
We could do that, we could declare.
The whole island probably did.
Yep.
Well, the island's trust under the policy statement requires the Lone Island to be self-sufficient in water, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, you can't pipe it over the main, that's what that means.
Yeah, I
That's
understand.
definitely something we should pursue, whether we want to do that right now or.
Yeah.